Okay, Mayor.
Can I call this meeting to order? Cindy, would you mind reading the statement of compliance?
Sure. This meeting is being held in compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act and with the annual notice advertised in the Trenton Times, provided to the Hunterdon County Democrat, the Trenton Times, and the posting of the meeting agenda on the bulletin board at City Hall and on the city's website at www.lambertville.nj.org and on the exterior door of the elevator entrance at City Hall, and was sent to department heads and people on the listserv. This meeting is being recorded using the Zoom meeting profile. The video will be uploaded to YouTube, and the link to the meeting will be made available on the city's website approximately 2 business days following the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Can we get a motion to go into closed?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Delete meeting. Yeah.
We might want to say the closed items and exceptions.
Okay. The meeting, the closed session is to discuss the business administrator's contract and also shared services contract with the Borough of Flemington.
Okay.
Hello.
Hey, Beth. Everybody's going to closed session.
Okay.
See you
Bye.
soon. Bye.
So Tina, I get out completely and then I'll come back, right?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank
check
you.
your email. Cindy sent you a link.
Yep. Thank you.
No problem.
Off, right?
This meeting is being held in compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act with the annual notice advertised in the Trenton Times, provided to the Hunterdon County Democrat and the Trenton Times, the posting of the meeting agenda on the bulletin board at City Hall, on the city's website at www.lambertville.nj.org, on the exterior door of the elevator entrance at City Hall, and to the department heads and listserv. This meeting is being recorded using Zoom meeting profile. The video will be uploaded to YouTube, and a link to the meeting will be made available on the city's website approximately 2 business days following the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we get a roll call?
Councilman Sanders. I see that he's signed on. Councilman Sanders?
Yes.
Here, okay. Councilwoman Taylor?
Here.
Councilwoman Urbish?
Here.
Council President Sarah?
Here.
Mayor Fall?
Here.
Thank you.
I think there's some feedback, so I'm just going to ask folks who are panelists to go on mute unless they're speaking. Next, can we get the Pledge of Allegiance? If everyone would rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to ask everyone to remain standing for a moment of silence for folks who are serving in the military at home and abroad, and for all of those on the front line of the COVID-19 pandemic fight. Thank you. Okay, next up, Tina, I'm gonna ask that we skip the public comment until we get to the place where the public is actually commenting. Bill, would you mind reading your statement regarding online council sessions?
Based on the public health emergency caused by the COVID-19 virus, the state of New Jersey and the city of Lambertville have taken necessary action to ensure the continued regular operation of government. The Open Public Meetings Act, as amended, authorizes governing bodies to conduct public meetings through the use of streaming services and other online meeting platforms. The city is utilizing Zoom video conferencing, which also provides a dial-in feature if residents would prefer to participate by phone rather than video, as well as teleconferencing for those who wish to connect by phone only. The city will continue to rely on the procedures currently in place for public comments directed to city officials during all meetings. There will be no change in the city's public comment policy for virtual meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to note tonight that we are recording our meeting, and that that recording will be up within 2 business days of the meeting. We are implementing this for the first time based on a vote from members of council. Council, does anybody have any questions regarding the meeting recording or any of the policies therein? Okay, thank you. Moving on, we have 2 separate presentations this evening and a few urgent votes, but we're going to be focused on the presentations and some ongoing COVID-19 policies and discussions. So I want to start by discussing the parklet and streeteries, continuing that parklet and streeteries conversation that we had in our previous meeting. All of you should have received the memo from me regarding the suggested pricing for using the city's parklet. Did everybody get that memo? Okay, so functionally for the public, the city of Lambertville had piloted a parklet last year, as outdoor dining and streeteries are now opening back up from the governor's official orders. We wanted to make that parklet available. The pilot program last year was to sort of gauge interest and to come up with a series of policies based on how best to use that. The memo that's been supplied to the governing body functionally has just a few changes based on that pilot program. The first is that there'd be a $50 application fee, and that application is available online. That there are some stipulations about hold harmless agreements, insurance agreements that the business would have to use in order to be able to actually have the parklet installed, and that the cost of installation and ultimately of the breakdown and removal would fall to the business owner. We calculated that cost based on the number of public works members that it takes to break down that parklet and to move it. The suggested amount of time is 1 month in front of any business. First come, first served based on the application. If no one applies and the business would like the parklet to stay for the next month, they can request that it remain in front of their business. And so that's sort of the basics. Does anybody have any questions, concerns, or additions to the policy? Yes, Councilwoman Taylor.
Just a couple small questions. I like this in general. So the parklet can be placed anywhere other than Bridge Street?
That's correct. Yeah. I'm sorry. Any DOT related road. So both Bridge Street and Main Street are currently not available for the parklet.
Okay. And we mentioned restaurants in the stipulations, but would we let a business that's not a restaurant have the parklet outside?
Absolutely. And we had tried that previously as a part of our pilot last year. We had reached out to several non-restaurant businesses, but didn't receive a ton of interest. That may change, obviously, with the COVID-19 pandemic, but our assumption is that this will be primarily used by restaurants.
Okay. And if a business has already paid the application fee, paid the setup fee, and gets to keep it for an additional month because there's no other interest, is there any additional fee for that additional month?
No, we're only charging the fee for the actual the work of the Public Works Department. This isn't, there's no sort of direct value benefit. The application fee is to approve the time and work it would take to approve the application, and the fee is based on the time that it takes to install and break down the parklet.
And just one last question. Well, I understand this is probably very unlikely, but let's say a business that is not a restaurant wanted to pay for and host the parklet, and they wanted to use it for outdoor display of their goods. Is that okay with us?
Yes, I see no issue with that, and if you'd like us to include that in the memo, where I'm happy to do so, unless there are any other concerns from the council regarding that.
Yeah, it's probably unlikely, but just so we're clear that, that it's available to not just restaurants.
Yeah, I'm happy to include language about that in the final memo that will be placed online next to the application. We've actually already had one business from the community reach out with interest.
Great, thank you.
And Mayor, this is first come, first served, you said?
That's correct. We had initially in the prior year, in our sort of post discussion, discussed having the parklet sort of be weighed by either a committee or members of this council to make sure that it was spread and sort of evenly distributed throughout the city, and so that it hit some of the other goals that we had about drawing traffic off of North Union off of Bridge Street onto North Union Street. However, in light of the pandemic and the changes in operation within the city, I felt that it was best to leave that to the businesses that needed it, and that this was the best way to sort of move forward. I'd be willing to change that next year, but in light of COVID-19, it seems like these businesses have a better idea of what they need. Any other questions about the parklet?
No, I think it's great.
Okay, so we'll make that available to folks beginning next week, and myself, Emily, and Alex will coordinate with any applicants and the Public Works Department to ensure that these are installed. Next, we had a conversation regarding the streeteries and identifying the cost of using either one or two parking spaces at either metered or non-metered spots. In our last discussion, we wanted to come back to you with some of those numbers, which I will also share with the governing body. The concern here is that functionally, we want to make sure that that businesses are able to take advantage of some of the outdoor seating issues. We've already had one streetery placed on North Union Street at Living Charlie's, but the governing body has to eventually come to a consensus agreement on what the value of those metered spots are. Excuse me for one moment here. Just pulling this up. So I know that we had an initial discussion about this. Were there any other questions from the governing body regarding sort of information needed from us to help us drive towards that decision?
I'm sorry, I'm just a little bit confused. So this is from the conversation at the last council meeting. We had requested some additional information. You're just asking if there's anything else before you come back to us at the next council meeting. Is that correct?
I'll be sending a memo, and this is my apologies. I was looking at the agenda and I realized my memo never made it onto there. So I'll send a memo following this hearing. I'm going to go through what the estimated costs are now, unless we'd like to kick that to the next meeting.
I think it's a little bit hard to just do verbally. I think, at least for me, I don't want to speak for anybody else. I would prefer to kind of see everything laid out. And if we're not moving forward with any decision making today because it wasn't on the agenda, I just don't see why we would go over it. And there might be people in the public that would want to, would be interested in that. And if it wasn't on the agenda, I just don't think we should really.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll ensure that that memo gets to everybody before COB tomorrow, and we can move forward on trying to nail down a cost. I want to make sure, particularly because folks are starting to take advantage of these street eateries, that we get a sense of how much the governing body is willing to reduce that charge. Okay, the final conversation that I want to bring up before we move to our presentations tonight is we had discussed in the previous meeting reducing the number of meetings in August to just one voting session. And so I know that there was a general consensus that we think that we'll be able to accomplish what we need to accomplish for the month of August. Are there any concerns from the governing body about canceling the working session for August? I'm sorry, I believe it's Cindy, the working
August 4th. August 4th.
Not unless there's city business that can't be done, Mayor.
Councilwoman Taylor.
I don't have a concern, but I do want to let you know there's a chance I may not be able to join the meeting later in the month. I may be away, but I will confirm with you and Cindy.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, I don't have a problem with that either. I do know that obviously this year has been unique and challenging because of the pandemic. I know previously the goal had been to have a working session and a voting session each month, and we haven't been able to stick to that based on everything going on, but I would hope that we start to move back towards that because, it has just been a very grueling schedule, I think, for all of us here and for the public. So starting to move back towards, I think, taking a little bit of a break in August and having just one meeting instead of two, and then moving towards working sessions and voting sessions, and being very clear about that will, I think I will appreciate it, and hopefully it'll be beneficial to everybody.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I mean, obviously the change in the budget schedule, what has been driving the difference between our working and voting sessions. The three resolutions that we have on the table for this evening are all time sensitive, including the application of the new the administration of a grant and an application of our new technology. So we are trying to move away from non-essential ordinances or non-essential voting practices, but it has been difficult since the change in May, but we can work on that. Are there any other questions or concerns regarding the change in our schedule in August? If not, Bill, do we need to take any formal action in order to cancel our public hearing in August? I believe it's already been, and Cindy, that this may be a question for you. I believe that it's already been noticed.
It has been noticed and advertised.
Was
Bill,
it annual
Yeah, I'll
notice?
coordinate with Cindy on, we'll take whatever steps we have to make sure the notice goes out if it's decided that we're not going to hold the August 4th meeting.
typically when we cancel, we send notice to everybody and post it on the agenda, on the, the website and every place that we post all of our meeting schedules.
No formal action has been taken in terms of the governing body voting.
No.
Okay. With that in mind, Alex, I might tip it over to you to introduce, the conversation with Matt Larkin and why we're having this discussion tonight.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. So we have Matt Larkin from the library board here. The library has a handful of time-sensitive, urgent, immediate repair requests. This is sort of outside of the capital discussions that we've been having We all know that there's, more medium and longer term repairs and renovations and maintenance needed for the building. But in the short term, we have a pretty kind of limited pot of money available to us for maintenance of all the city buildings. So Matt is going to talk to us a little bit about what the library's needs are, and we just wanted to get, the mayor and I and Matt wanted to get the governing body's kind of reaction and input before kind of moving forward on working on, what we'll kind of work out the details of whatever that kind of highest priority items are to make sure that the building is safe, which is really the concern with a couple of these items.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Tina, would you mind promoting Matt to a panelist for this portion of the discussion? Matt, you're currently muted.
Okay. Okay, do you want me just to go through the presentation? Has everyone seen it, or?
No, that'd be helpful.
Okay. Does everyone have the presentation in front of them, or should I share a screen? How do you want to do this?
If you could share your screen, that would also be helpful. I don't know if he's capable of doing that. Alex or Tina, would you be able to?
He is capable, yes.
Okay, so share screen. Okay, here we go. Share.
Matt, I don't see anything. When you share your screen, did you click the PowerPoint or whatever presentation you wanted?
I think we lost Matt.
Lost, yes, we did. Lost Matt. I can watch to see if he rejoins the meeting and then promote him again.
Mayor, do you want to do the second presentation first while Matt gets back on? Oh, you're muted.
I don't want to start the second presentation unless we don't think that Matt is going to be able to get back on. It may be worth us. Alex, I know that you've got a copy of this presentation. Is that something that you can?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to walk through it without him.
Yeah.
But if needed to help with the screen sharing, I can pull up. I think I have the most recent version here.
Karen Riedberg is raising her hand. She is on the library board. Would you like me to unmute her?
Yes.
Hi, folks. Yeah, this is Karen. I am mostly familiar with the presentation. If Matt can't get back on, I'm happy to sort of walk through it with Alex if that would be helpful.
I think in observance of time, I know that we've got a lot of other stuff on the agenda. Karen, if you don't mind getting started, and then if Matt gets back on, we can pop him back in, and you guys can tag team.
Sure, that would be fine. Alex, can you share? I think I have it in my email, but it would be quicker.
Yeah, I can. If you give me a moment, I should be able to pull that up, and I can share my screen. Just take me a second. Okay. Can everybody see that?
I can see it. Can everybody else see it?
It looks like it.
Okay. So the facilities committee has been working with Jen Sirac, who's the acting director, and I think Alex, you may have also been involved in a walkthrough to kind of take a look at the most pressing of the building repair needs. So this presentation just kind of walks through what we believe are the most critical things to address before we are able to let certainly patrons back into the building whenever that is allowed. So if you just go to the next. And so some of these issues are, go back to some estimates that we got back in 2019. So these are, I think, the most critical ones in rough order of importance. There's the porch railing on the Main Street side, which is very loose and could present a falling hazard. The Lily Street porch roof, column and decking are rotting. We don't believe, we certainly need to check to see whether ventilation is sufficient and meets CDC guidelines. We have a lot of windows that don't open, for example, so I know that we're concerned that ventilation needs might not be met when folks are back in the building. There's also leaking, the rotted eaves, and there's a leak. I don't know if you've all been in the library when there's been water dripping over the folks who work at the front desk, but I have certainly seen that. And there's also, we found some starlings nesting in the building, which is obviously not great either. So as you can see, they did get estimates for the first two of these back in 2019. We don't, I guess, yet have estimates for the second two. And so now I think the rest of the presentation is mostly just photographs showing you kind of the issues that we just talked about. So these are the damaged railing, and then that second photo is how far you would fall if you went through it. The next slide, I think, is the porch. So this is the emergency exit route as well. So it is critical that it be safe for folks to get out that way. And you can see the rotting wood there. The next slide, I think, is so this is where the birds got in, and the roof is leaking. And then the next, so this is and this one I'm not entirely sure, I confess, where that is exactly, but that's just an area of deteriorating bricks and mortar. Yeah, so that's the porch on the front of the building, where you can see more of the ceiling over the porch, and the columns there are rotting, and there's concern about the structural integrity, I think, of those columns. And so again, here are some estimates that we had gotten back in 2019. Again, issues with the ventilation in the time where we're concerned about the virus circulation. That we got an estimate of 126.5 thousand for that. The steps separating from the support wall. There's also the elevator is broken a lot of the time, so we got an estimate for replacing the elevator. That's obviously a requirement for ADA, and there's moisture in the basement, which makes it unusable for storage, which is an issue, I think, because we are going to need to make more space inside the library to space patrons out, and so we will need places to put material that we need to move out of the way. And then any, this is, yeah, so there are the entire exterior of the building has been in need of repair for some time. So this is just more examples of that, especially that I don't know what that's called, the window area there, the picture on the left, where the pieces of that sort of fall off of the building periodically. And I think that's all. So I'm sure Matt would have given you more details. I think the crux of the matter is just that we have gone through the process of trying to prioritize some of the most critical pieces. And I think that was primarily what he wanted to share.
Well, Karen, I really appreciate this. I know that there is some concern about the tightening of our capital budget in order to reduce spending overall, and that was what prompted this conversation from the facilities committee. And so I'm really looking forward to having a discussion about this in both this meeting and our next. So, depending on how the conversation goes tonight, we may ask you guys to come back to our next council meeting, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Alex, I'm going to ask you to leave the screen up there for a quick minute. I have a couple of clarifying questions, just sort of thinking through, particularly around some of the what you guys have, your first through fourth IDs. We are going to be able to, we believe, get some amount of refunds or a payback from the federal government around coronavirus related expenditures. Cindy and Alex, and I may kick this to Bill as well. Do you feel that the enhancing or study of the ventilation would fall under the categorization of corona related expenses?
I would have to look into it further, Mayor, before I really answered that. It did, really dig in deep. Typically, they cover things that are directly related to the emergency, which is COVID-19. But we can look into that further. There may also be some other grants out there that are available through that. I think it's a 1777 fund or something, but we certainly can look into that.
Yeah, I know that a lot of counties got into some hot water at the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis by claiming costs and expenses that the feds didn't see as, a direct correlation, and that the feds have a sort of narrow understanding around COVID-19 to be, PPE and expenses related to that. But since this is directly related to air quality and ventilation, I would like to look into that. And so Alex and Cindy, I'm going to ask you guys to take that question on.
Okay, no problem.
And then in terms of being able to create space for more immediate social distancing needs, understanding that there's significant water and humidity issues within the basement, Alex and Cindy, are there other alternative storage spaces? I know that City Hall just had some water remediation done between 2018 and 2020. Are there other places that we may be able to provide off-site storage for the library?
Potentially, but it would be small amounts.
Yeah.
I assume that their volumes are pretty big. Part of the problem that we have at City Hall is that we can't put a lot in the attic. You're not supposed to put that much, weight, which is why we moved things from the attic to the basement to take the pressure off. But certainly I think that we could help to a small degree. Alex?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there's probably a little bit of space we could grab in the basement. And it does seem, relatively dry. I don't know the humidity and how bad that is and what they're storing. But we could probably find a little space, and it might also be worth, I mean, this is also something that would be, I don't think would be any more or less reimbursable from FEMA. You know, these are both things that we have to do in response to this. Same with putting plexiglass on window, like all that kind of stuff falls in a similar category, which we have no guarantee of reimbursements for. But this would be another thing to look into. And, you know, we could also look into renting, you know, a pod or something. And I mean, it doesn't really match the historic, I mean, you know, having something outside the building at the library. And I'm not sure exactly where it could go, but that is, you know, we could find a temporary solution with some sort of, you know, pod that's rented on a monthly basis too.
Yeah, I mean, I know that the police department just had a pretty significant a record destruction.
True.
And so I do wonder whether or not there may be more space there, or alternatively, since we aren't expecting that we're going to be opening up for public hearings in the year 2020, using alternate space like the council meeting, the council room, or the court to alleviate space from the library's perspective, but also sort of reduce costs. I think that's something that we're willing to look into. I mean, obviously, it's not the envelope of the building issues, but in the sort of direct response to a need for more storage space, that is something that we're willing to consider. Does anybody on the... Oh, go ahead, Alex. I'm sorry.
It would be interesting too. I can follow up with the library, but it would be interesting to, and I would assume this is something that we'll do at a certain point here anyway, is kind of get into some of the details with them after getting a little bit of guidance here. But depending on what items and how often they need to come in and out, that may sort of determine whether, you know, the police department, if it's more medium and long-term storage, that might work more easily if they don't have to come in and out on a regular basis. But for example, if they're coming in and out every day, you know, that might add a layer of complexity, you know, that might constrain us one way or the other. So I just have that as a note, as a follow-up for the libraries, understanding how they need to access the space.
I mean, prior to COVID-19, our library was already in a one-in, one-out book policy, right. Just because of the total lack of space and of shelving space. So I do want to make sure that that's something that, you know, that Matt had presented to us as a board during our budget hearings, and it is important to note here that we are already at gross capacity for this building as it is, prior to sort of needing to create more space to make the library usable for patrons. All right, so let's get into the dollars and cents then. Are there any other questions or ideas about some of the direct COVID related concerns? Councilman Parrish?
Mayor, are we going to talk about some of the other things?
We are, yes. Yeah, no, I just wanted to, those were two that I felt were relatively low impact in terms of the capital budget, so I wanted to knock those out of the way first. So in terms of the capital budget, you know, we had for this year tried to steel ourselves for a really significantly reduced capital expenses, which really had only a de minimis amount of expenditure for our city facilities and for upkeep. You know, this would be outside of that budget by a pretty significant amount. Alex, you're going to have to help me out here, but I believe we were at 285 for this year. For our total capital, the total amount of money that we are approving for our capital budget. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and if I could just add a note, if I may, on as far as what we have available for building maintenance, which is an ordinance from 2017 that we're trying to stretch till next year, so that we don't have to incur any additional borrowing costs. And we have somewhere, it's not a lot left. We have somewhere in a $60,000 to $70,000 range in that ordinance, assuming that we can put these charges to that ordinance. You know, that is, that's how much we've got for maintenance for all the city buildings for the next year.
And I do want to note here that while some of these are really egregious, particularly the railing, which is a significant falling hazard, there are other egregious, you know, and potentially also dangerous concerns at other buildings. So just, I do want the council to keep in mind here that we have an openly leaking roof in City Hall, and we sort of had made the determination not to address that this year. And so, I just want to make sure that we're, that we're seeing the picture for the whole. So with that, Councilwoman, if you want to, Councilwoman Urbish, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's not on here, but the lead remediation, that is very concerning to me. This is a place that we have programming for children. I know it's not directly COVID related, but I don't want to lose sight of that. I think if we have lead in our buildings, it needs to be remediated. That is a serious public health hazard.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I will note that, the city had tried to, and actually put an RFP out for lead remediation on the library building, and received a series of really conflicting and ultimately bad bids. And then it was determined that project was not of the highest priority by the library, that there were these sort of other structural issues, including the elevator and some of these envelope issues on the outside of the building that were of really significant concern, particularly with the cost that was coming back from the lead remediation.
So what would be helpful for me ahead of our next meeting or any sort of decision making is to get a clear sort of understanding of what the estimates are for the various costs and where they fall in the priority. I know that a lot of this already exists with capital planning that we did earlier in the year, and just getting a full picture of, the total cost of all of those, so that we can really kind of talk it through. This is the first time seeing all this information, so I'm not really prepared to provide much feedback on it. I need to digest it a little bit more, but I think having sort of a clear breakdown of the potential costs and, taking a look at that in comparison with the, capital budget that we previously approved.
Council President Acero?
Yes, I think I'd just like to get Alex's take on how he thinks these estimates are as far as kind of the real world. I know we often get estimates, and I'm assuming that these aren't bids, right? This is just an estimate. They're well over 6 months ago. Do you have a sense of if these are fairly accurate, or, maybe you need time, or, any expertise you might have there?
Yeah, there's a couple things that I could give a little bit of information on, and there's a couple that I think we need to do a little bit more due diligence. And to respond, Council President and Councilwoman, to your questions too, we can also recirculate the cost evaluations that we did with Michael Burns last year, and we did the initial kind of assessments of all the buildings. These are not thorough. These were a couple hours walking through the building, going through all the kind of pointing things out, looking at approximate costs of repairs. And so I can circulate those to everybody so you can see those numbers too. So for example, the paint, the lead abatement, and the repair and painting of the building is likely somewhere between $150,000 and $250,000. The lead abatement portion of that, I think, drove the cost of the bids up higher than maybe what was potentially. I wasn't here when those bids went out, but I think that lead abatement cost itself is almost six figures, just for not even counting the repainting or repairs. Just the lead abatement portion, which has to be performed by a specialized licensed contractor. I think for the railing, that's something that's probably doable within within that general kind of scope. That first item, that $20,000 range, I think that we can probably, we might be able to do it for less, depending on how we, what the requirements are from.
How thoroughly that we actually fix this problem, right? I do think that the $20,000 estimate here is based on actually not just sort of mitigating the problem, but actually fixing it. and we could take sort of a Band-Aid on a
We
gate
could.
approach in order to drive costs down, but still address what is obviously a safety hazard.
Right. So I think that it would just, for me, it would be helpful to have an understanding of what those options are, or, you know, if it would be cost effective to sort of bundle some of this work. I think all of these are very concerning to me, incredibly concerning. They're all related to public health and safety. And so I think spending time sort of speculating what may or may not be, I just think it would be helpful to get sort of clear outline of what is reasonable to expect and what the options are.
Yeah, I would say here that, you know, from my perspective, we should take the library committee's sort of word for it in the sense of, you know, they have identified what their four most important you know, next steps for immediate repair would be. You know, they triaged this list for us at our request because they knew that we're actively trying to reduce the total amount of spending on our capital budget, and that these four were of sort of the highest priority from that committee. You know, I know Alex, we had a ventilation issue in a ventilation inspection and an issue at the Acme. When we send this out to the council, we'll ensure that that cost, if you think that that's a you know, a comparable number.
I don't think we're going to have a number. We would have to do a little due diligence to figure that out for the library.
Okay.
That was cleaning the central air duct system in the Acme building to get the mildew out of it.
But we will send out these numbers. I think that the larger question is not, you know, sort of what are our best options here, but what the council's appetite is to engage in further borrowing to either Band-Aid or fully fix some of these really significant structural issues before we go into sort of the minute details of what all of our options are. I'd like to be able to hear from council about, you know, understanding our significant budget concerns, what the appetite is to address these issues.
Mayor, you may not be able to see me because of the way the screen is, but I would just ask at this point if we could, these are all very important issues, and sort of seconding Councilwoman Urbish, we don't have the information to have an informed conversation. So if we could table this for now in the interest of time and move on and return to this when we have more full information, I think that might be useful for everyone.
Okay. Well, Alex and myself will work with the library board to fill out the rest of the estimated costs here, and we'll get something to the council early next week.
Also, Mayor, I think it'd be helpful, at least for me anyway, to do a tour with these problems in mind. So try to arrange for that through Matt or someone if we could. Probably have to do it separately so we don't have a meeting, but I'd love to take a look.
We can do it two at a time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that the library would be more than willing to host that. So I'm just going to ask you individually reach out to Matt or to Karen to schedule that at your own time if you
Will do.
necessary. Okay. Moving on then, if we can move to our second presentation of the evening. We have our chairs of our community advisory team, Paul Poole and Sarah Gold, who want to give a quick update on the community advisory team's work. Sarah and Paul, if you guys could raise your hands so that we can promote you. Tina, Sarah's raised her hand.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to kick it immediately over to you guys to sort of talk about what your last two meetings have have been and what's our, what you'd like to update the council.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll keep it short, realizing that you have a full agenda tonight. The Lambertville Community Advisory Team is comprised of a group of individuals with both a diverse background and views on the redevelopment of the city. There are 20 members of the CAT team, with the co-chairs of Sarah Gold and myself. The team is committed to engaging in productive civil discussions to understand the community's values as they pertain to the character of the city and development. Understanding the city's challenges and communicate the obligations to the community. And after understanding these situations and values, advocate to the city council for plans and address these challenges and align with the community's values. For the first few months, our primary focus is going to be on the police station site, the fair share housing that we need to address under the most recent court order from Judge Miller. Those deadlines, I guess, the December 31 of 2020 is the main deadline. There are other various steps that we have to address to get to that deadline, but that's the deadline that we're looking at. Moving into the fall, we will then start, as we get past some of the next couple months, start looking at the facilities priority. And when you think about it, the fair share housing and the facilities are going to interchange at some point, because part of the facilities issue will be the new home for the police department. So that's where those will cross paths. We've had 2 meetings so far. Our first meeting was primarily an organizational meeting. The second meeting, we spent a lot of time talking about community engagement and communication, and Sarah's really going to fill you in on where we are and what our plans are with that. And then also, Alex provided us with an overview of the budgeting process. Because at the first meeting, many members of the CAT team had questions about funding, financing, and we anticipate having another couple of presentations by Alex over time to educate us. So with that, Sarah, can you
Sure.
kind of talk about the public engagement plan?
Yeah. So like Paul mentioned, we started talking about community engagement in our second meeting, and we are really looking forward to getting the input from the community. So we just wanted to present to council and the public what our plan for the next few months will be. And so again, this is really concentrating on the police station site, because this is as we're working towards the affordable housing deadlines. So within the next week and a half to 2 weeks, everybody in the community should expect to receive a letter in the mail with information about the CAT. So the charge that Paul just read, kind of explaining what we're doing. It'll also have information about a short survey that we're going to be making available to all community members, where we really want to gather more information and learn more about the community's values in terms of the police station site. That letter will also include a link to our website, which will have more information about engaging with us, and it'll also have the survey link. And then beginning by the end of the month, we're planning on having at least weekly office hours with the CAT, and these will run through the end of the summer. We're anticipating having at least 12 of these sessions, and these are going to be sessions that are smaller group sessions. We'll be able to accommodate however many people want to attend. But the goal is to really be able to listen to the community at these sessions and understand where people are with the site, and what they would like to see in terms of design elements and environment and things like that. At the September 1st council working session, the CAT will report back to council and the public about what we've learned from our community engagement and our CAT sessions. And this is all kind of in service to our early October deadline. So in early October, we're going to be presenting the CAT's recommendations for the police station site to the planning board and the council. This will be done kind of like Supreme Court style, where we'll have a majority opinion, and then we'll also have a dissenting opinion on the recommendations. Throughout this whole process, we're going to be providing updates like this one to the council and the public, both at public meetings and through memos from each meeting. So the memos from our first 2 meetings were circulated to council prior to this meeting, but they're also available on our page at the city website. So that's lambertvilleNJ.org/cat. And the charge that Paul read is also available there, as is the list of all of the CAT members and all of our bios. So again, I just want to reiterate that this is our first phase dealing with the police station affordable housing site. And we'll be moving into the facilities towards the end of the year. So we just want to let the community know that we will be having a similar process for community engagement for that phase as well. So that's the update that we had prepared.
We're really hoping and anticipating that we will get a lot of responses to the questionnaire. The more people to respond, it helps us out. I mean, we've heard a lot about the different sites and all that, but we need to hear more. And that's what we're looking for. Any questions?
Council President Azaro?
Just a quick question. You might have said this, Sarah, but the office hours, will they be virtual?
Yes, everything will be virtual. And our office hours, thank you for asking about that, Beth. We're going to be having them at different hours throughout the day, so we should be able to accommodate people's schedules. So we'll have some on the weekends, we'll have some in the evenings, and some during the day.
Oh, the other thing, when we send out the letter and the survey, they will be both in English and Spanish.
And we'll also be making paper copies of the survey available for those who might not have internet access as well. So all of that information will be available in our letter.
Are there any other questions from the council?
No, this sounds like a good start. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for all your hard work, guys.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to our bills list. Can I get a motion to approve the bills? Councilwoman Taylor, that's first. Councilwoman Urbish, I'm sorry, Council President Sarah, that's a second. Can I get a roll call vote?
Councilman Sanders,
Yes.
Councilwoman Taylor,
Yes.
Councilwoman Urbish,
Yes.
Council President Azaro,
Yes.
Mayor Fall.
Yes. Moving on to our resolutions for this evening. We have 3 resolutions on the consent agenda. Are there any concerns or questions about those resolutions? Yes, Councilwoman Taylor.
I apologize if I missed this. I'm just curious why the change in contractor for the FEMA project?
Alex, I'm going to let you take this one unless you'd like me to.
Sure. No, I'm happy to. Councilwoman, so basically the company Princeton Hydro that is on to award the contract to has worked with Fisherman's Mark and has basically worked on putting together some of the initial design for this project. There's been a couple different, we've been piecing together a few different things trying to get this like project organized a little bit. And so originally we were asking the city's engineer to take the lead on it. We spoke with the city's engineer. They're very comfortable with having Princeton Hydro, who's more familiar with the project, do this 30% proposal. This 30% proposal will get us to the point of being able to actually get the grant awarded to the city. So this is sort of the easiest and most familiar way to get to the stage where we actually would receive the grant and can begin the project. And at that point, the Suburban would kind of take over as the city's agent, managing the project. And then, for example, writing up an RFP to go out to bid for the company to actually design and build the solution, which could be Princeton Hydro or could be any other company. Does that help clarify that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you. That makes sense. Is the change cost neutral or almost cost neutral?
Yeah. This is the preferred option of all of the different parties involved.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions about the resolutions?
Yeah, I do, Mayor, and this may be a question for Alex too. Just on Resolution 84 regarding spatial data logic. I know we talked about this before, and I just want to make sure that this is clear in my head here. The permits NJ, which is sunsetting, is we have been using that just for construction permits. Is that correct? And the spatial data logic has a much broader array of functionality. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And I just want to understand the alternatives first. It is for permits NJ, it was supposed to sunset in June. Do we know when that's sunsetting?
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be September 1st.
Okay.
It's been pushed back a couple times, but that seems to be my understanding of September 1st.
And can you help me out with the other functions of spatial data logic and like what the intended rollout of those additional functionalities is? Is this something we can do immediately use? Is this going to take time, or what are the other elements?
It's going to take a little bit of time. Basically, the construction is the biggest piece and the first piece. And so we're just sort of setting up the training and onboarding because we have to get the data from DCA, export it out of there and into the software. The company, Spatial Data Logic, is going to be responsible for taking all the like county tax map data and importing it into the system. So that's one of the kind of add-on benefits here is that we're going to have a fully digitized, interactive like tax map block like that we can search by block and lot, and basically it will be it's basically like a CRM where each property record is a record in a database. So if we roll this out to other departments, so for example, property maintenance or code enforcement in the future, or public works or shade tree, or anything like that, basically any interaction that a property has with the city, theoretically, if we roll this out to every department over the long term, would be housed within the same system. So if someone calls in with a question or an issue, you'd be able to type the address in and we could see all the prior interactions with issues on that property, for example.
But like, how long will it take to start to roll that? Obviously, construction is what we need to replace right away because we have an immediate need. The other things are functionality that we don't currently have today. Is that going to take a year, 6 months, 5 years? How long to get that additional functionality?
The construction would be probably, we're looking at, a 4 to 6 week timeline, maybe to get that sort of up and running. It will probably take a little bit longer to kind of work out all the kinks. I would think that after that, we haven't 100% finalized this, but I would think that probably the next most valuable one to bring in would be Public Works. So these are basically all non-emergency service requests like 311. So pothole issues, a missed garbage pickup, anything like that, any sort of non-emergency request, we would basically route through the system. So people could go on the website and fill it out. There'll be a mobile application that people can use, or people can call City Hall. And the nice thing is that instead of having to transfer people around, basically anybody who takes the phone call will have a screen kind of bookmarked on each of our computers, and we can just enter the request straight in. So it prevents us from having to transfer people to the right department, for example. And then once we enter it in, we get the tracking number and it would get assigned. So Public Works, my guess, would probably be next. We can do things like shade tree requests through it. So in other municipalities where I've rolled out these systems, shade tree issues, there was just like dozens and dozens of like pending shade tree issues at any given time. So we rolled that out sooner. We could do animal and pet licenses through this.
Alex, can I interject here really quickly that, I think that the question at hand here is when are we going to start to see some of the benefits of this rollout? And the answer would be that, Alex and myself, along with our department heads, are going to be working individually within each department to roll this out. And we're going to do that in a way where we see the functionality for the public first, obviously construction being the first, and then Alex and I will continue to build out and start to roll out department by department. Ultimately, the goal is that we will have a ticketing service for any request of the city, so that, you know, in future years, we can do things like pull the number of total pothole requests for any given street.
Yes, the nature of my question here is that if I remember correctly, when this came out originally in our discussion, we identified that there was a solution available for construction only that would be replacing the construction only. That was a couple $1,000s, if I remember correctly. So we're paying a lot more money for extra utility. I'm just trying to get a sense of confirmation and confidence that that extra functionality is something that we're going to take advantage of.
Well, I want
Perhaps it could-
to push back here really briefly here, Council. Yeah, I'll get to your question as well, Councilwoman Urbish. But one of the ways in which we weighed these plans was based on not just sort of the cheapest option, but what was the most functional. The other determination was that a lot of these cheaper options ultimately have licensing issues that you have to re-up every year and sort of hidden costs in those. And so one of the things that we've asked Alex to do as a part of the study for rolling this out was not just looking at functionality, but what the long-term investment would be, so that the city is not overpaying to get the cheaper rate. It's not simply that, you know, this is more functional and will allow us to do things like have a digital city hall where you can, you know, that you're not just shouting into the ether when you have a pothole issue, but also that we are sort of getting the best bang for the buck. And I feel confident in after having heard this description on multiple occasions that is what we are actually getting. Now, if there's a timeline that you feel like, you know, if we're implementing this at this time, that you'd like to see all of this rolled out, Alex, you know, we'd like to hear that, and then work towards whether or not that's actually.
Yeah, it's. Go ahead, Manny.
I think maybe what would be beneficial in this case is, as you and Alex and the department heads put together that plan, provide that to us so we have an understanding of what this looks like as it rolls out.
I'm happy to provide a timeline of implementation when we are further along in the process. Councilman Sanders, you said you had something.
No, I'm good.
Alex, was there anything else that you wanted to add in terms of what this rollout is going to look like in terms of the department?
I would just say maybe two additional things real quick. One is that fire prevention is one of the areas that we're not replacing that with this year, but that is one of the other pieces of software that we currently spend about $5,000 a year just for fire prevention. And that could be subsumed into this in the future if we wanted to. And this will also, the company that does our website, which we're just finishing a redo of this, this will allow people to have, this is very integrated, so people will be able to go to the Lambertville website in the future and log into an account and actually see the open issues that they have with the city, and like be able to click on things and get updates and get emails when their permits are ready and all that kind of stuff. So we're pretty excited, especially on the construction front, with basically all of our inspectors having tablets out in the field. Contractors and homeowners will get updates as soon as the inspection is done. Like, one of the things that we've heard is wanting to streamline those processes a little bit. And so just kind of excited for those opportunities, which I think, as the mayor mentioned, we'll start seeing some of that this fall.
Okay. Were there any other questions about the consent agenda? Yes, Councilwoman Taylor.
Just a point in the agenda, and I'm pretty sure I have opened the final version. The third item has the incorrect title in the summary title. So if you look at number 3.
Yeah.
That's correct. It does. I had to switch things around because we have to do you have to do one of the items first. So I apologize. I switched them around and didn't get the right titles in.
Yeah, no, Cindy, you know what? I've made mistakes too. Just wanted to, for the public, just to clarify, make sure that nobody got confused.
And so what do we need to do in terms of the adoption piece of this?
Councilman Taylor, would you prefer that we take these one at a time rather than in rather than in consent?
I would.
Okay, I'm happy to do that. So we'll begin with Resolution 83, 2020. It's a resolution to cancel Resolution number 71, 2020, authorizing the contract with Suburban Engineering. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Councilwoman Sanders first, Councilwoman Taylor second. Can I get a roll call vote?
Councilman Sanders,
Yes.
Councilwoman Taylor,
Yes.
Councilwoman Urbish,
Yes.
Council President Asaro,
Yes.
Mayor Paul.
Yes. The next resolution that we have here is a resolution to authorize the contract with Spatial Data Logic Incorporated for the purchase of software of the state contract award number SHIA 89851, which includes the maintenance and support of professional services in the amount not to exceed $64,250 the first year and $13,650 for the ongoing licensing cost after year 5. Can I get a motion to approve that resolution? Council President Acero for the first. Can I get a second?
I'll make the second, but
Hold on.
have a concern that we have 2 hands up, and my guess is they're about this resolution.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed those hands.
No, wait, I'm confused. Hold on. We did resolution 83. We need to do resolution 84. But what you read is what is in the agenda for resolution 85.
Mayor Fall is using what I had to make some changes because you have to appropriate the money. So I had to move some things around and change. So that's what the confusion is. This is okay if she wants to do that one next. I will just change the order. The important thing is
to do resolution 80, to read the resolution to authorize the insertion of the special revenue first.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Yes.
Okay. But I do see 3 hands up, so I'm going to hold on calling for a motion until we. Yes, Councilwoman Taylor.
Sorry, before we take public comment, so now I'm totally confused. So we've got 83, which is clear. We're finished with that. 84 is the one for the software contract, yes?
No, 84 is about the grant.
Okay.
So then 85 is about.
So is there a resolution? Is there actually a resolution to authorize the insertion of a special item of revenue?
Yes, there is.
And what number is it?
85.
So then.
Okay.
Sorry, the 84 is the resolution to authorize, 84 is the resolution to authorize the insertion of a special item, and 85 is then to authorize the spatial data.
Okay, understood.
That's what I have on my most recent agenda here.
Okay, so that's on me. I apologize about that. But I will open up, if there's a comment about either resolution 84 or resolution 85, we'll hear comments about that. If there's general public comment, then we're going to ask that you save that to the end of the hearing. Tina, can you read the instructions on how to participate with public comment?
Yes. The public participation of the meeting will be taken under agenda item number 14. If you are currently utilizing a computer to participate, you would click the raise hand button on the bottom of the screen. This will place you in a queue that I can see when it is time to take public comments. People are sorted in the order they raise their hands. When I call on you, a message will pop up asking if you want to unmute yourself. If you choose to move forward and place a public comment or question, choose to unmute. If you've changed your mind, then please choose deny. If you are dialing in on your phone, to avoid having your phone number displayed on screen, first dial *67, then the meeting phone number, followed by the meeting identification number. Your phone number will not be displayed. To raise your hand, dial *9 to be placed in the queue. When called on, the system will ask you to confirm being unmuted to proceed. You'll be asked to state your full name and address into the record, then please feel free to make your comment. You will remain unmuted while the governing body responds. Please be conscious of background noises. When public comments are finished, participants will be placed back on mute for the duration of the meeting. Members of the governing body will raise their hand to make a to make a comment or ask a question.
Thank you, Tina. Can you call Judy first?
Yes. Judy, please state your full name and address into the record, then proceed with your comment or question.
This is Judy Gleason, 86 North Union Street. I'm speaking to the spatial data logic resolution, and I was concerned that Councilman Sanders was making exactly a key point, but I don't think it was ever answered, which was, I don't know where additional money has come from, but my guess is it probably hasn't come from anywhere. And this is a very, for us right now as Lambertville, it's a very high ticket item, which would be great for the future and great for new stuff and great for the tomorrow, but it's not great for, for us right now, number one. Number two, one of the points that was made was there's no licensing cost, and I see that there's a $13,650 licensing cost for after the 5 years, which are apparently included in the $64,250 first amount of money. And we're not that big a city. We're not that big an office of employees in the city. We're not that big an operation to need all of this stuff right now if the money situation is as bad or even half as bad for us as it is for the whole rest of the country. So I just would really ask that Councilman Sanders' question at least be drilled down, because that was the question. Do we have to do this whole thing now?
Councilman Sanders, you were called on directly. Would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, the question, you know, and I have to take some ownership of this. You know, I probably should have done some work in between meetings, but it's the concern that I had when this first came up, which is, you know, and we talked, Mayor, you mentioned in the context of the library, there are comprehensive fix that are sort of appropriate. Sometimes you have to do a bandage approach. So I just don't have a feel for this. It's hard to make a decision. This is a $64,000 question, literally. You know, if I remember correctly, there was a couple $1,000 solution for the thing. So, given our circumstances, that's a pretty big dollar difference. So that's why I was just trying to get a sense of, you know, if it's going to be a spectacular return on investment and we're going to be able to do all these things. I also had ringing in my head Alex's comment from the last time that, you know, that it's going to take some time to maybe get to some of these other things. So we're buying something that has value, and I trust the judgment there. I just wonder if this is the time to be pulling the trigger between whatever, I forget the number, $4,000 or $5,000 versus 64.
Alex, do you want to comment on sort of the alternate options and why we felt that spatial data logic was both the best return on investment in terms of value, but also sort of the thought process and why we chose this beyond sort of the bells and whistles?
And Mayor, can I just also ask that included in that, because I know that we have had this exact presentation, I think at 2 other council meetings. Can we also talk about the timing? And, you know, since we've gotten extensions because the state is responding to the pandemic, I think the real question here that we're talking about is if we need to vote on this tonight.
I see no, well, I'd like to answer that question, but first, Alex, if you'd like to give a brief reprise of the larger presentation that we had done several months ago regarding this plan.
Yeah, although I have a question for everybody, because I'm not sure what the alternate option is that's been brought up a couple times. Because there wasn't a super cheap option. There was a number of other companies, and actually one of the reasons I had recommended that we move forward with this company was transparency in their pricing compared to some of the other companies that I did not feel confident that we were buying a product that wouldn't balloon in price very quickly. So I guess I'm not totally sure what the alternate option is that.
Yeah, and perhaps I have a recollection, but the memo that you gave to us, I went back and tried to look at it today. It did not reference any prices or any information about the alternatives. So it was really just the only thing I really had to go on was what I thought was a comment of yours, and maybe I'm mistaken, was that one of the options that would have been just for construction was, my recollection was like $4,000. Maybe I misremember that.
Excuse me, this is Judy, who's still here since I'm the one who asked the question. There was exactly that. Councilman Sanders, you are remembering exactly what I am remembering and what was discussed as to whether it was a bad idea or not to just do around a $5,000 thing. Because one of the questioners, not me, kept asking, yes, but what would it cost? Yes, but what would it cost? And ultimately, what I think it was Alex said was, it's about $5,000, but it only does this one thing, and etc. That questioner that night.
I think it would be helpful for us, Judy, if we allowed Alex, who was the one who did the price comparisons for the alternative potential alternatives, to speak to this, because he's the one with the direct information about the costs.
Understood.
I'm not 100% sure what the alternate is that we're referring to. I mean, there's a range of prices from the different companies. This is not the most expensive option that I've looked at. Again, one of the reasons that I was recommending this company is that it seemed like what their pricing model and what they were offering seemed like a kind of Goldilocks fit. It was not something that was so small that we could only do one thing with it and could not do anything else with it at all. And that we would pay a smaller amount, but we'd get a relatively even smaller amount of value out of it. But it wasn't it's not the premium with all the possible bells and whistles. And it's not some of the other softwares that I felt like we were buying into something that we were, that basically charged us by module, so that we would have to pay more to add any more modules on in the future. This gave us a little bit of breathing room that we were able to do construction. But for example, we could, if it works for fire prevention, and we take that $5,000 for, maybe that's the number, but that's how much we spend on Mobilize, which is the software we use for our fire prevention office. And if we're able to take that off, now we've reduced the $12,000 a year-ish cost to $7,000 by replacing it with that. And so I'm not sure if that was maybe part of the conversation from earlier on. I don't have all the numbers. I don't have all my notes in front of me from doing the research. But again, this was sort of the Goldilocks option, and the one that to me had the most transparent pricing. So we weren't buying something that we were going to get stuck in a proprietary system that we had to keep spending more dollars on in the future.
Alex, I'm sorry to interject, but I believe there was something else about licensing fees year to year rather than how this is.
That's right. Sorry. So yeah, and that wasn't in the memo about this, is that it was, I think it was 10 to 12,000 or 10 to 14,000 is the estimate per year cost for the software after the 5 years, right? We're buying a package of 5 years, training, setup, everything at once. That includes the annual fees. We specifically decided to do a cloud version that has annual fees rather than a software that we were purchasing and installing on a server that we had to buy. The server that the city maintains already is, for any of us, I know there's a couple staff who watch the council meetings, it is very slow to get into. It costs all sorts of money in the IT support that we have to provide to it. We just moved our admin system, our finance system, to the cloud. That is sort of the direction that most small municipalities that don't have an internal IT department are going. So we don't have to take the responsibility for maintaining that equipment in the building. So the idea here is that by buying something in the cloud, right, we are actually, in the long term, reducing the financial commitment that we have to make because we don't have to buy the hardware, we don't have to support it, and we're not responsible for it. The company is responsible for maintaining it. So there are annual fees. That's all bundled together in the 5-year price. And then there will be annual fees going forward that are in the range that I identified.
Councilwoman Urbish?
Councilman Sanders, would it be helpful for you then if we table this for this evening? I don't know if my timing question was answered or not, but if we've got time to consider this at a future date and to get sort of the actual explanation in more detail of not just sort of how this relates to the construction, but all the other pieces.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, before I allow you to answer that, Councilman Sanders, the reason that we're hearing this tonight is actually on a working session is because it's time sensitive. And we can get into some more detail about why it is time sensitive, but the, my stance on this is that Alex is, we hired Alex and as in an administrative capacity to weigh these types of options because none of us are module professionals or proficient in that, and so he's given us now we've had 2 months to go over his his memo where he made recommendations also to the public. I would strongly urge that we move forward and actually vote on this issue.
Mayor, I completely hear you, and I'm an expert in these. I'm more than happy to lean on the expertise of someone else, but we've had now 2 public hearings on this issue. We're having a 3rd one, and there remain outstanding questions. And I apologize. I'm feeling a little frustrated about it because I feel like we keep having the same exact conversation and the same questions are being asked. And so if the same questions are being asked, it means that we don't have a full understanding of the answer.
Councilman Sanders, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
That's okay. That's why I raised one of the questions about the timing. And I have ownership of this. I should have done this in the interim, and I realized that we're kicking the can down the road here. It has its own dangers. So if we're going to run out of time, I certainly understand that. If it's something we could do at a later date, at the next meeting, that would be my preference. But I'd yield to the council here, and we may actually have some other questions here too.
Alex?
So the resolution being on at this point was sort of a formality because we already had approved the bond ordinance for this, and that was my mistake for not having this resolution memorializing the contract on that same meeting. All parties, after the bond ordinance, after the funding was approved, we moved forward with this software. So we wanted to make sure the paperwork was right by listing this resolution. I would say that a delay of timing, there were no outstanding questions on my radar after the last meeting of anything that we needed to provide back to the governing body. But a delay at this point would definitely jeopardize the continuity of services in the construction office.
Okay. Well, I don't want to put that in jeopardy.
So basically, this is really a done deal, except for us passing this. The money's already been laid out.
I mean, technically, we moved forward. There were no outstanding questions from the prior governing body meeting that would have stopped us from moving forward. The funding had been put in place. And even though we're purchasing this off of a state contract, we wanted to do the resolution to make sure, we went through all the process the right way. And again, I should have had that resolution listed on that same meeting when we adopted the bond ordinance. We did catch that, wanted to make sure the resolution was listed, so we did the paperwork. But from my perspective, there weren't any pending questions that the governing body was waiting on an answer for about this.
That's fair.
I'm a little bit confused as to why then the timing of us voting on this is so critical. It's a procedure that needs to be done.
If the council is expressing concerns about supporting the resolution for, and Alex, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, supporting the resolution to move forward on spatial data logic, I don't think that I would not feel comfortable in the administrative side continuing to onboard as we're doing, working specifically with spatial data logic to begin to do trainings with the construction office. If that is the case, then we are on hold for 2 weeks until the governing body can take this issue up again. Alex, is that a fair representation of the concern?
That's correct. I mean, we've been a little worried about the timeline, but we brought this up with the governing body in April, did the introductions and adoptions, and have been moving forward. And yeah, if we did push it 2 weeks, that will delay the implementation past the point where we understand DCA is sunsetting our access to permits NJ. But there were no outstanding questions. There was nothing that had been communicated to myself or any of the staff that we should do anything other than move forward after having discussed it in 2 prior governing body meetings and having the funding approved.
Yep, that's a fair statement. I should have raised these questions, brought them up in between meetings. So
before we move on to more public comment on this issue, Councilwoman, if you feel strongly that we should hold on resolving this particular issue, I think we should have a discussion about that.
I feel.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was directed to me. I'm sorry.
No, that was directed to Councilwoman Erbish.
Okay.
I think that this is a good idea. I stated so previously. I'm trying to be responsive to what I'm hearing from my colleague and also from the public. And so that's why I brought it up.
Councilman Sanders.
Yeah, if this is going to foul up the execution of our ability to promptly handle construction permits, that's not a result that I want to see happen. Again, apologize for not having raised these some of these questions and delved a little bit deeper. I was curious as to those alternatives, and I should have raised them beforehand.
Alex, do you feel like it's a fair statement that this could jeopardize the continuity of service for our construction office?
At this point, it will. Unless the DCA pushes back closing permits on J. But I mean, if we're a day or two behind in some of the things we've been working on in the last week, that could push this back a month. Like we're kind of at the end here. With the timing.
Okay. Keeping that in mind, can we get the next public comment?
Yes. Lauren, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
Lauren Kovacs, 90 Douglas Street. In light of the COVID-19 immediate financial crisis, I beg the council to transfer spending on all technology upgrades beyond what is absolutely necessary for the immediate requirements for the construction permits this year to go to the library repairs. I again ask the council not to prioritize what was described to spending right now should be focused on critical matters, not conveniences and long-term contracts. The city has not had a problem calling special additional sessions to vote on developments and things like that. And so I asked the city to call a special session to vote on a reduced scope contract that just provides the service that we need so that it is in place on time. I also ask that people on the council stop saying things like this is a done deal. Every vote counts, including this one. There are still questions from council members about why this is happening, and I feel like they're being pressured to vote for timing purposes. And there's still pushback from residents. And it's just, again, I'll say it over and over, it's so frustrating to feel like our council is being steered toward and pressured to vote on things that could be resolved in a different way. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we get the next, does anybody have any comments on that? Hearing none, can we get the next public comment?
Yes. Sue, please state your full name and address into the record, then proceed with your comment or question.
Hi, I'm Sue Bell, 407 Surgeon Drive. I actually was going to also ask that you find a cheaper alternative after the information presented about the library. I did look into CDC recommendation for ventilations for Huntington Drug Awareness Program. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay, I don't know if you have to do it, but the fact your windows won't open, you really shouldn't be opening that library anytime soon. So until you know those costs, which are immediate, having the luxury of a very expensive system for 2,500 homes seems excessive to me. I'd love to drive a BMW, but I can't afford it. Okay, so I'm really asking that you think about the financial of the finances of the community and the city, all of which is still really, really unknown. This is a luxury, and the library sounds like it needs to be condemned. So I appreciate being able to make a comment. Thank you.
Harry, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question. Harry, please unmute yourself.
Oh, yes, this is Harry Young. And I would like to ask Julie.
Harry, before you continue, can you please state your address?
Oh, 32 Ferry Street.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask Julie, I keep hearing the rumor that taxes are going up 18%. Could you?
Harry, I'm gonna stop you right there. We're only taking public comment on resolutions number 84 and 85. And I don't respond to rumors of any kind on the public record.
Well, at some point, I'd like to understand, are taxes going up 18%?
I think we need to focus on the, oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
We need to limit this.
If you don't mind.
Sure.
Harry, I appreciate your comment, but you have to save that for the public comment at the end of the meeting.
Okay, well, then this $64,000 software question seems to be a bit of a big spend when it appears we have no money and we have great needs facing us at the library. So
I want to note here also that this is $64,000 over 5 years, which is $12,000. A little bit. Yes, Alex?
And sorry, Mayor, if it's worthwhile, I did just, I know there were some questions about the pricing of some of the competitors, and I did just pull up some of the notes, and I just wanted to mention, if it's helpful at all in the discussion, the main other competitor of this type of product, which is called GovPilot, GOV Pilot, that would have been approximately $125,000 over the same time period. And so again, I just wanted to make sure to mention, as we looked at all the different softwares, this wasn't the bare bones option, but it was by no means even close to the most expensive option. And that was part of the reason why we recommended it.
And Alex, I'm sorry to clarify, the bond ordinance that was adopted, I believe it was either 2 or 3 meetings ago, that was with the intent of utilizing those funds for this software?
That is correct.
Okay. Tina, can we get the next comment, please?
Yes. Barbara, please state your full name and address into the record, then proceed with your comment or question.
Hi, it's Barbara Lindsay, 123 North Franklin Street. Can you hear me? I'm not sure if I unmuted. Yeah. Is there any wiggle room, Alex, in the sunset of the current system? Are they moving forward with it for sure? During COVID, when I'm sure we're not the only town who doesn't have a a replacement for the software currently used for construction, correct?
There has been sort of a mad rush this year of people purchasing these softwares because of the announcement. I can't speak for the DCA or why the state does a lot of things the way they do it, but I would be surprised if they pushed it back. Certainly the vendor and my other colleagues, there is a little bit of a sense of urgency right now of getting these things done.
I've done consulting and contracting work for the state, and things change all the time, and sunset dates move constantly. Yeah, I do have an objection to spending this kind of money, especially now hearing that the library needs the repairs it does, and maybe it is more beneficial to buy something less expensive in the interim and go for something with more bells and whistles later on. I kind
Yes.
of.
I'm sorry, Barbara, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I thought you had your comment.
Yep, no, I'm finished. No, I saw Madeline was raising her hand there.
Councilman Urbish?
I just have a clarifying question. This bond has already been approved. Has the money been bonded for? Have we taken out this money?
I don't believe so, but
Okay.
Mr. Opal,
I'd have to check on that. I don't know.
That's fine. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Alicia, please state your full name and address into the record, then proceed with your comment or question.
Alicia Lerman, 101 East Blair Tract. Good evening. I think 64,000, although it's 12,000 a year, is a significant spend. I'm wondering, I know there's questions about shared service. Could we not partner with West Amwell or Stockton or someplace else who's got the same software and just partner rather than having to spend the money on our own in order to reduce costs?
So Alicia, I appreciate you asking that question. Actually, our construction office already has a shared service with Frenchtown. We are the provider of that shared service, and so are required to maintain our statutory, the obligated statutory computer software programs in order to maintain that shared service.
Right, but now can we go and share service with somebody who we can benefit from? So Frenchtown is getting a benefit because we're their provider. So can we partner with other folks in order to minimize this cost or not even have to spend it by finding somebody who's already got the system and just, partnering with them? It seems silly for a town of 2,500 homes and whatever, 1.1 square miles that we've got to have such a heavy duty investment on an annual basis for IT.
Alex, would you like to take this?
Yeah, one thing that might be worth mentioning here is that although it's worth pursuing some of those shared services, and we recently were awarded a grant from the DCA for $75,000 to pursue shared services specifically with our construction office using our lead agency status, providing this as a service to Frenchtown as sort of the launching point for all of that. So in the long term, that is definitely something that we're looking into, but most likely in that scenario, Lambertville is going to be the providing agency and actually able to earn revenue from it instead of having to pay another town for the service. Because most of these software, the software companies wouldn't exist if towns could just kind of, skirt the cost and just, trade the services with each other. You have to pay per users or per desktop. There's different ways. They wouldn't have a business model if it was really easy to do that. However, in the medium and long term, there is a benefit that Lambertville can get by being a really solid professional agency that provides these services such that other towns want to contract with us, and we can use that revenue to offset some of the financial challenges that we have right now and in the future.
I appreciate that, but as a taxpayer, I don't want to pay for my city to be a provider of services. Yeah, I mean, because that's going to cost us. I got to pay for that and hope that we can get reimbursed.
No,
this is a revenue.
Alicia, that's not how shared services work. Shared services are often mean that the providing agency is making a revenue, which means that it's a reduction in the total cost that taxpayer has.
No, I get that, but you have to make the investment right? You have to build up. If you're saying that we have to become a top-notch professional city, we have to make investments to allow to make that happen. We, the taxpayers, have to foot that bill until we can get other people to help offshare revenue. Again, I just think that knowing where we are financially, I would like to see a little bit more pulling back. I haven't seen us make any pain. You know, the only pain I think I'm seeing is like, you know, not getting investments in fixing the library or something else. I'm just not seeing that we're being really cost cutting in this time when we need to be. So, but I'll let the next person comment.
Yes, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason that we applied for this grant from DCA is so that that some of the investment that we would make to expand the services that we provide are specifically not footed by Lambertville taxpayers, but are footed by the state, who we all pay plenty of taxes to already. So we're aware of these issues, and we're doing this in a way that is going to continue to be revenue positive, such that the shared service that we're providing helps Lambertville taxpayers by bringing in additional revenue, even through the growth phases.
But to be clear here, and just to get back to the point of what we're discussing, we did not purchase this particular, we are not purchasing this particular computer software program in order to have someday have a revenue or shared service. This is a requirement by the state for us to change over. We looked at a multitude of different options and chose the option that was the best option for the city in terms of service provision, while also being of low cost. Tina, can we get the next comment?
Yes. Paul, please state your full name and address into the record, and please proceed with your comment or question.
Paul Stevens, 39 Corey. I have to admit, I'm kind of surprised that you're surprised by this discussion going on, because yes, there were 2 previous meetings on the bond ordinance. And at the time, discussion was ended on those because it was said, this is just a bond ordinance so we can get the money if we want. It's a resolution that will decide whether or not we really spend the money. Now here it is, it's a resolution, and people are asking the same questions and getting the same answers. And as Councilwoman Urbish said, apparently the answers aren't satisfying the people that are asking these questions. So, like I say, maybe it's a good thing that we're recording these things now, because clearly we remember things differently, apparently, it seems to me. Because like I said, things were ended because we were told you'll be able to vote on the resolution to actually spend the money. Here it is, time to do that, excuse me. And the same questions are out there, okay? That's my comment.
Tina, can we get the next comment?
Yes. DKB, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question. Please unmute yourself.
Unmute, go ahead. Yeah, hi, this is Dave Bird, B-U-R-D, 255 Brunswick Avenue in Lambertville.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you. A couple of questions. Number one, since the bonding was approved, but the resolution wasn't approved by mayor and council, all right, did the business administrator go out and communicate to the vendor that the vendor is now already in doing work that has not been approved by council? If so, that would seem very inappropriate.
That's not how I would classify the work that we're doing in terms of preparing to onboard spatial data logic. You know, Alex, I'm happy to take this question unless you'd like to comment on it directly. I was under the impression that the bond specifically laid out the spatial data logic was the vendor that we were going to be moving forward with. And I instructed our business administrator to move forward on the implementation and beginning that training.
If that is the case, all right, and an approving resolution to spend the money in the bond ordinance, all right, then for the business administrator or the mayor to bring in a vendor to have them do work without authority to do so, okay, certainly is not the way I think government needs to be run. So that's question number one. And I think that needs to be answered. And I think the council members need to ask that question and get a satisfactory answer for it. The other question that I have on the system, all right, and the DCA and the September 1 deadline, one thing that was mentioned, this seems to be a system that has already been implemented in other environments, all right, by the business administrator. And it may be nice for a larger municipality, and that's great. All right, but I certainly agree as a taxpayer in the city of Lambertville that $65,000 over 5 years is a lot of money. And is there an escape clause at the end of the 5 years? Are we committed to doing this on infinitum? All right, so I certainly think that there has to be answers to that. The other piece, if DCA hasn't fixed the date yet and has moved it numerous times, and the fact that the governor has people on furlough, all right, and there's critical issues facing the state, and I certainly think are going to be facing the city. I think that there may be an appropriateness to say, go to the DCA and say, look, we need a cheap, effective, short-term solution to we're all out of this mess. And I think that mayor has the contacts at the state level that should be able to speak to somebody to get some common sense going on this and save the $65,000.
So Alex, I'm going to ask you to answer the question regarding the exit after the 5-year contract. Would you mind answering that first?
Sure. So that was one of the criteria that I use anytime I'm evaluating a piece of software. And this is something where we can export all of the data at the end if we need to, and move that to any other software or system that we might want to use.
So just for a point of clarification, that is at the end of the 5 years before you start the $13,000 or $14,000 annual payment. Is that correct?
We can export that data anytime we want to.
Okay, and during the first 5 years for the $65,000, all right, the implementation, financial situations change. Is there any, escape clause, all right, in the contract with the vendor that says we need to get out of this, and that you can escape from the software, all right, maybe a charge for effort completed, all right, but that you can regain your money?
New Jersey statute allows local governments to terminate a contract if they don't have the funding appropriated for it.
Okay, what about quality of system? The quality of the system or service being provided by the vendor. If this vendor is onboarding numerous clients at the same time because of this DCA deadline, okay, and you say, you know what, we're not getting service, it's impacting our residents, it's impacting the city, do you have a right to get out for lack of performance?
There is an ability to do that. It is not easy to do. It would have to be a real problem, which I don't expect. But again, as I stated, if there's not funding appropriated for something, there is not a legal requirement to continue the contract, as far as I understand it. That is a tool that local governments have that actually is relatively powerful tool in these contract negotiations.
But the action for the $65,000 that's before mayor and council, all right, that's a payment right now. So the money's already been paid, all right? Or if this resolution is approved tonight, all right, that payment is going to be made, all right? And we're going to be gaining, getting into the system, maybe starting with one module, if you will, all right, and then moving on to others over time, all right? But once they have the money, don't we lose some capability of doing anything about it?
I think the question here is if we find that the service is so incompatible with the city that we would need to remove ourselves from this contract, or we find that the service is not up to snuff, there is legal recourse for us there is legal recourse for us to call that contract. However, there is a significant amount of savings that we'll see by incurring this 5-year contract. Alex, can you speak to? My understanding from this as a layman is that these contracts are mostly multi-year contracts. Is that the case?
Yeah, I mean, this is off a state contract. So we're not doing anything, kind of crazy here on the Lambertville side. The reason why we are able to get better pricing, one is because, as I mentioned, this is cheaper than many of the alternatives out there, including approximately half of the cost of the next most competitive alternate. When we looked at the different setups and what each would likely cost us. And that we got a 20% discount on top of that for signing the contract. As I mentioned in the memo, and as we discussed in April, when this information was provided to the governing body and public, that there was an interviews conducted with nearly a dozen other towns with different software implementations. And the only reason that I would make a recommendation to move forward with a piece of software in a multi-year contract is if there was a very high degree of confidence that the company is an extremely legitimate company that's very responsive to local government needs, and that won't be a problem for us down the road. So, not a small amount of due diligence was done here, and not a small amount of research was done speaking to other municipalities about their experiences. And all of those things mixed together, especially on the cost side for this, which ultimately, produced this recommendation. Someone mentioned that this was something that I had done in other towns. This is actually not one of the softwares I have implemented in other towns, but I'm familiar with a number of the other competitors out there and was able to speak to other colleagues, other municipal managers about their experiences, and this floated to the top of the list.
All right, thank you, Alex. Councilwoman Taylor.
What I think would be helpful to hear, Alex, a lot of the questions we're getting are, look, is there a solution that gets us the permitting and that's it, and not allowing all these other modules? So I understand, I've worked with GovPilot. I understand how these programs work. I understand that GovPilot is way more expensive and that this is middle of the road relative to GovPilot. But what the question that we're hearing from the public is, what's the option that just replaces the software that currently exists? So what is the relative cost for that option? Or does that option exist?
It doesn't really. I mean, it would be nice if the state had provided a solution after closing the system down. But I mean, with each of these different systems, so you could take GovPilot and you could say, all right, well, we're going to purchase GovPilot or SDL or Mitchell-Humphreys or any of these, and we're going to do the most minimal installation possible. So on GovPilot, for example, that's $20,000 a year. That's the smallest package that you can buy. This package of SDL is actually pretty small, even for a town our size. So we have to be sort of creative on the back end about how all the workflows will work. We pay a per desktop license cost for the software. So each desktop user, and there are 5 as part of our contract, that is where that is how the fees are assessed. with some additional, with a small annual server cloud fee. The main cost is in the desktop licenses. So for the construction office, that is at absolute baseline minimum 3 licenses. And so you could remove a couple $1,000s from it and do the bare minimum, but then we wouldn't get any of the additional benefits. And again, the baseline cost of some of the other softwares are more expensive than the version of this that we're doing.
So there's no, and thank you for that. That's helpful to hear. But just to be 100% clear, there's no, that you're aware of, software solution that just replaces this permitting functionality that is going away.
No, you could, if you wanted to, I'm sure you could, I'm sure if you had enough internal IT staff and you were willing to, duct tape together a bunch of things, you could find a way to do it for free.
I'm sure that's exactly what Councilwoman Taylor is asking for. What she's asking for is, was there some sort of, paperclip, just the construction and nothing else option that we looked at?
There was no software that I looked at that said, we are a only direct replacement for permits NJ, and this is the cost just for that. The softwares all have different pricing configurations. So GovPilot is by module and SDL is by number of licenses. So I can't answer that question perfectly because, yeah, we could design an SDL system that only did construction, right? It's not that it can or can't be that. It's up to us to decide how many users are part of the system, or with GovPilot to decide how many modules are part of the system. And so what I'm saying is that the most bare minimum that you could do with SDL for our construction office would be 3 of the desktop licenses. So you would take off a couple $1,000s a year from that. But that would be the most that you could gain. And again, the GovPilot software was more expensive. The bottom line version that would just replace permits NJ was more expensive than the 5-user version of SDL that we have in front of us.
Okay, and then just one more clarifying question. So, and that all makes sense. SDLs per user, which I assume then means that as we add on modules, the cost doesn't shift because we're paying per user, not per module.
So with SDL, all of the modules are included, and
Okay.
the users are not total users, they're desktop licenses. So there are desktop licenses and tablet and mobile licenses. So for example, an inspector using the software and a tablet we can have 100 inspectors using tablets, and that doesn't change the pricing at all for us. If we added 100 desktop users, that would really shoot up the price. So part of it is on us, and this is part of the way that we're approaching this, right, this is already a value engineered solution to some degree, because in a world of us having as much money as, I don't know, a town could have to spend on this, you would just make everybody a desktop user, because then everybody has access to kind of the full suite. But we're going to have to be a little bit more narrow and careful than that. And that's how we were able to get it down to just 5 desktop users. That is sort of the bare minimum for us to be able to deploy this and add on the critical functions that we want to do, and add on a couple of the other departments that we know we want to add on to.
And specifically, this was in reference to, and the discussion began with adding on the desktop users around Public Works because of the increased amount of public angst and anxiety, which we had talked about on the last meeting, about things like city beautification, potholes, general maintenance to the city. And that this would allow us to actually be able to track that and get some real data, not just data, but actually be able to be more responsive as a city to what has been an ongoing concern for months.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think you maybe just confused me. I thought I had it. So just correct me if I'm wrong. We're paying for 5 desktop licenses. That's all included in the current cost that we have before us. If we expand to Public Works, does that mean the price would change because we'd be adding desktop users?
That is included in the 5.
Okay, thank you.
And just one more clarifying my questions. I appreciate you answering all these questions, Alex. So I think part of the problem was that, at least I had heard that there was an option available to address this that was $4,000 or $5,000. So to be clear, that does not exist.
I don't want to say it does not. I don't think that would be fair for me to say that something doesn't exist, but I provided the list of the different software companies that I looked at as part of the review, emailed municipal managers, read all the memos that DCA sent out. They sent out a list of software. Maybe 20% of the softwares on the list that DCA sent out are companies that don't even exist anymore, like went to their websites and there was nothing there. So I went through all of those things, came out with, I don't have the memo in front of me, but it was maybe 6 or 7 different companies, and conducted interviews of different towns that use them. And those were the ones that I looked at. So I just don't want to, I don't want to overstate something. It didn't come across my radar, but I wouldn't go as far as to say it doesn't exist.
I had in my head that you had a comment earlier that suggested that part of your review led to just a solution for the problem that we have, and it was a couple $1,000s, but that's not the case. Of what you looked at, there wasn't one that was $4,000 or $5,000 for construction.
No, and I can pull up the different company names.
I hate to do this, and that was really the question there.
And Councilman, I think the issue is that we may have been crossing our paths with a comment made by a member of the public that said that we should search for a bare bones solution that's a couple $1,000s. That's my recollection of it. We can go back to the.
It could be. I'm certainly not blessed with a perfect memory.
And what is also possible that came up in a conversation is one of the other solutions. So the companies that I looked at were Jungle Lasers, GovPilot, Spatial Data Logic, Mitchell Humphreys, SeeClickFix, and CityView. And SeeClickFix is one that does not provide this service for construction offices, but they do provide a separate 311 service for non-emergency kind of public works service requests, and that software is in the price range of a few $1,000s a year.
That's not what we need.
Yeah, it's not. That's a different thing. I'm just not sure if that was. I'm just trying to help. Yeah.
Okay, we have 7 more comments, so I'd like to get through those. I'm going to ask that if you've already made a comment, and that if you are just simply continuing to repeat something that's already been repeated, that you just say that you're seconding, so that in the interest of time we can continue to move on.
Lily, please state your full name and address into the record, then proceed with your comment or question.
Yes, it's Lily Chen, 17 Clinton Street. Alex, this is a question for you. You were talking about the lead remediation cost, around $200,000 for the library.
Lily, I'm going to ask that you save that question until our regular public comment. If you have a comment that's specifically around Resolution 84 and 85, you're welcome.
All right. Fair enough.
Stephen, please state your full name and address into the record, then proceed with your comment or question. Stephen, please unmute yourself.
You're still muted, Stephen.
Would you like me to move on to the next question?
Stephen, can you unmute yourself? Yeah, let's move on to the next question. And if Stephen has something that he'd like to say, he can raise his hand again.
Okay. Sue, please state your full name and address into the record, then proceed with your comment or question.
Sue Bell, 407 Sergeant Drive. I don't want to like mix up a whole bunch of stuff, but Alex was talking about the grant that they just got for $75,000. What's in the grant for shared services for the construction office budget? Why did you need a bond then? Because I feel like it sort of got stuck together. I'm not accusing you of something, but I didn't quite understand why we'd need a bond if you applied for a grant for share that would cover some of the construction office. So I was curious what was in your budget for the grant that would relate to this project.
Sure. Thank you for that question. So we received a $75,000 grant from the state to study and implement shared services within Hunterdon County. Our construction office, which is already a shared service with Flemington, is sort of the base of that grant. It has nothing to do with that grant has nothing to do with the technology that we're discussing in this resolution. That grant is about having Lambertville allowing Lambertville to find new revenue through shared service, which is something that's really important for every municipality in New Jersey, to try and combine services where possible to save money and produce revenue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Richard, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question. Richard, please unmute yourself.
Richard, you're still not unmuted. Can you unmute yourself? Tina, I'm going to ask that you move on. Richard, if you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand again.
Lauren, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
Lauren Kovacs, 90 Douglas Street. Can you, is it true that the vendor is already working in City Hall?
No, I'm not really sure what your question is there. Can you rephrase that?
Sure. Mr. Bird called in and said something about that somebody was already working with the city for the technology. And you made it sound like that you felt comfortable that when the bond was passed for this service, that you would be able to start the services, and that passing this is sort of crossing T's and dotting I's.
We've been coordinating with the service provider to begin to plan for implementation and training. The finalization of this contract is based on this resolution.
So no contract's been signed.
Alex?
We've already started working with them because the timing issues are so urgent that if
Has
we
a
didn't
contract
do
been
that,
signed?
if we didn't do that, we would have put in jeopardy our ability for the continuity of our construction office. So the guidance that I was given was to proceed with this, and we've been working with the company to get those things set up, like the training, which hasn't happened yet, but will be hopefully happening shortly.
Yes or no, was a contract signed?
We authorized SDL to begin working with us on this. That was the guidance that I received from the prior meetings, so we have authorized SDL to begin working with us on getting this set up.
Without
again,
having
because
the
of the
actual
timing issues.
authorization from the council.
That was from my perspective, we made initial preparations to implement. If the council doesn't approve this resolution or holds on this resolution, that will end. This is not, at this time, I felt that was an appropriate action.
Still, no one's answered whether a contract's been signed.
I don't know how to answer that question, so I can't
Was
answer.
there a document that received your signature or your verbal authorization stating that the contract would be signed and sent, or an email that said you were approving the contract with this email?
To my recollection, I have not signed a direct contract for SDL. I did authorize Alex to move forward on preparation for implementation.
Well, either way, let me step in, Mayor, if I can. Even if one was mistakenly signed, if something was put in front of you, you didn't know what it was, or any other kind of thing where I know a number of documents come across your desk every day. If this resolution is not adopted tonight, any contract that was signed is invalid. No payments can be made to the vendor. So everything formal that needs to go forward is dependent on this resolution being adopted. Whether it is or it isn't, that determines whether the contract's valid or whether this vendor gets paid the $64,000.
I again beg the council members to table this vote or vote it down and pursue a pared down option for the service. And I don't know how many more times the residents can call in and talk about this and actually get, what we're asking for from the council. It's clear that, the recent elections that people are, thinking one way more than the other on spending in the community. And I just beg the council members to please take that into account and do not approve this contract. Thank you.
Lily, please state your full name and address into the record, and please proceed with your comment or question.
Lauren already made my point, so I'll wait for the public comment later to talk about the library. Thank you.
Richard, please state your full name and address into the record, then proceed with your comment or question. Richard, you are unmuted. Richard, please state your full name and address, and then please proceed with your comment or question. If you're talking, we can't hear you.
All right, I think we should move on.
Okay.
Richard, if you'd like to make a comment, you can raise your hand again.
Please state your full name and address into the record, then proceed with your comment or question. Please unmute yourself.
There you go. Hello?
Hi, please state your full name and address, and then
It's Al Camiotti, 33 Coriel Street, Lambertville. Hey, I've been listening for the last several months on this issue. And, listen, I appreciate the time and effort that the city's put into this. You guys have sat through, I don't know how many council meetings. Basically, about the same 4 or 5 people call in and complain about the same thing. For years, and I've attended council meetings, people bitched and moaned about the construction office and stuff like that. And this, I think, is something that has needed to be done for a long time. And I understand the city's got financial difficulties. However, this is stuff that everyday businesses do. And if Lambertville's got to run like a business, we need this kind of technology. And guess what? I think people out there, they want to got you to council on all this stuff. Look, do it. Vote it out. Because this is something that the city needs. And look, I've sat on numerous boards, whether it's the Sewage Authority, the Fire Commission, the Lambertville, or the Delaware River Joint Toll Bridge Commission. If we don't get caught up here and do this, we're just going to have these same old problems.
All right,
I'm very frustrated just to hear this. It's the same 5 people at every meeting. Voting and get it done.
I'm sorry, I appreciate the comment, but I want to keep this within the scope of actually commenting on the resolution and to not be in a position.
It is, Mayor, but I'm just saying, as somebody who's listens into this thing, it's frustrating as hell. Look, I think Alex has done a good job. We need this technology now.
I appreciate that, but I'm going to ask that everyone who's making comments make comments directly to the council and not about other members of the community. All right, I think that's the last of this. I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the resolution. And Cindy, just to clarify again, this is resolution 85.
Yes, Mayor, you already have a motion on the floor. It was made by Council President Asaro and seconded by Councilwoman Taylor prior to the discussion.
Okay, I'm going to ask that Bill, I'd like to redo that motion in case any of the public comment changed the council's mind about how they'd like to move forward here.
Sure.
Can we waive the previous motion?
Sure, we can, yeah. That's fine.
Okay, so can I get a motion to approve resolution number 85? Is there any comment? I have a first from Beth. Is there any comment before I ask for a second about concerns about voting on this resolution this evening? Councilwoman Urbish.
I think that this is a good idea, but I am concerned and a little frustrated that I think things that we should be able to easily answer, we are not answering. And one of the commenters brought up the fact that we did discuss when we were voting on this as an ordinance that there was still decisions to be made to actually spend the money. And then, so this is what I'm wrestling with. This is what I'm frustrated about. I think I don't want to slow things down. I don't want to put ourselves in jeopardy of being out of compliance with the state. But at the same time, if that is the case, if we are on this tight deadline, then like these questions should have been answered. And I don't, again, I support this. I think that we need to do it, but the feeling of being, that we have no time, that we can't debate these things, that we can't ask for more information because we have to get it done on this timeline. Well, that puts us in a very tough spot. And this is not the first time that has happened. And, thinking back to the previous council meeting, when we talked about this as an ordinance, like this is what I'm wrestling with. I'm struggling very hard. I was prepared to support this tonight. I think it is a good idea. I think we should move forward with it, but I am concerned about the lack of answers to some of these questions.
Councilwoman Urbish, I can understand your frustration here because I do feel like we're getting a lot of the same questions from the public. At the time of the support from that ordinance, I was under the impression and felt that we had answered those questions to the best of the city's ability. And I'll note here that at the beginning of this conversation, it was noted that there was no further outreach from any member of the council for further information needed. We had provided a memo. We had had a long series of discussions. And when this agenda item came out, we heard nothing from the council about further information being needed. While I do agree that it is frustrating now to say that we are in a tight timeline, we were not in the same rush in April, and that there was significant time available for the council to ask for further information.
I completely agree, and I did not ask for more information because I think that this is a good idea, but the fact that we got questions in April and then we're getting the same questions now, and it still feels like we're not answering them to the public as thoroughly as perhaps they should be, that is where my frustration is. And I think that some of these should be easy to answer. I think it should be easy enough to say the reason why we are going with this system is it is a better value over time. It is in response to specific feedback that we've gotten for, frankly, years, but certainly many months about the failings of our current systems. Those are important points. This is all part of the decision-making process. And it feels like members of the public are wanting us to haggle over pricing and just doing the bare bones and forgot about all of these other issues that actually do have an impact on economic development in Lambertville. If our construction office or our permitting office are slow, that is slow for economic development in town. I mean, all of these things have ramifications, and I just don't feel like we were able to give totally adequate answers to some of those questions that aren't new.
I mean, Councilman Urbish, I feel that the answer that you just gave is very similar to the answer that I gave at the beginning of this conversation, which was we weighed multiple options here and we found the best option that had the best ROI with the most competitive price, and that there was a myriad of due diligence done on this work that we had all discussed previously. The fact that there were members of the community who came back with those same questions, there's only so much more I feel like that the answer is really available there. Yes, Councilwoman Taylor.
I think Your point is well taken, Mayor and Alex, that none of us reached out in the interim. The one key piece of information that I think we're missing to share with the public is, I am not implying that Alex didn't do his homework. I know that he did, but is there a bare bones option, and what does that cost? And I think if we can provide a more concrete response to that question, we'll be in good shape. I mean, while sitting here, I Googled municipal construction permitting software, clicked the second option I saw, and that for just permitting software would have cost, for our city our size, $28,000 to install and $12,000 a year. So more expensive on the setup and similar priced moving forward for just that one thing. So I think we're probably making a good decision if we go with this. I don't think we had a couple key pieces of information totally wrapped up to help us make our case.
So, Councilwoman Taylor, I appreciate that. I will say, I read Alex's memo thoroughly before having this conversation with him, and had multiple conversations with him directly about the diligence that we went through in order to pick spatial data logic, which is a generally wide state contract that is widely used amongst municipalities. It is fair to say that, that a follow-up to the conversation that happened amongst the public in April would have been to produce a memo saying, this is, from the 6 reputable sources that we were able to find, these are the bare bone options. My concern here is that that does not paint the full picture of what our needs really are in the city. And Councilwoman Urbish actually did, I think did a reasonable job of saying that, it is easy to say that we want just the bare bone cheapest option, but that there are real consequences to that, not just on the economic development side, but on the experience of taxpayers and what they're in interacting with their municipal government is. And that all of that was weighed with the cost in order to provide you what we thought was the best option to move forward.
That's understood. But I think we're, even since April, where everybody's head has changed. We are under extreme financial pressure. We're also under extreme scrutiny, rightly so, from the members of our public. So I think we are obligated to be as careful as we can and as responsive as we can. The answer still may have been, we as a body will vote for something that is more expensive than the bare bones, but we need to be able to show that there is an option of why we're not going with it. I believe, based on Alex's research, that there probably isn't a $5,000 off-the-shelf thing that just does permitting. I don't think that exists out there. But I understand the public comment. That said, I think this solution actually makes sense for us, and I will vote to support it. But this conversation has been instructive for how we need to do a different job. I won't necessarily say better, but do a different job of communicating the types of facts that people need to feel comfortable with our decisions.
Fair. Before we move to make an action on this resolution, is there a follow-up piece of information that either you or Councilman Urbish would like to see us produce for the public so that we can increase the level of comfort and still be able to move forward without a discontinuation of service?
From my perspective, I don't know if it's directed to me, but if I could answer that, I think the answer is yes. I think what we're hearing from the public, and I agree with a lot of what Councilwoman Taylor just said, is that the public is asking us, because of COVID, because of these extraordinary challenges, to say, did you look at the Chevy option versus the Cadillac option? And, at the end of the day, we have to ensure that our decision represents value. It doesn't always mean the cheapest option, but I just feel like that's the question that folks are asking tonight. They've asked before. And I do feel like we haven't done a great job of, I understand this is not the most expensive, and that's very instructive. That's helpful. I think what's helpful is why, if there are less expensive options, why the value is not with those and with this. That's the piece of information that I think people want us to hear us work through. And that's what, if something could be produced like that, I think that would be enormously helpful.
Council President Nazaro.
Yeah, so I think we just need to show our work, right? And the criteria that Alex used, right? Write out the criteria, show why this $64,250 option met all of that, and then show, exactly as Councilman Sanders said, the lesser options and why they didn't meet your criteria and why those criteria are important. Just show our work. I think that goes a long way to shortcutting a lot of this conversation if we had had that in our pockets.
Alex, would you be willing to produce a rubric that would identify some of the key factors and how we use them and some alternate plans and produce that for the public?
If you or the governing body asked me to produce any documentation, I think I've always tried to answer everybody's questions and produce whatever documentation is helpful for everybody.
Okay, so I'm going to ask then that we put a timeline on this. I know that obviously this is going to be a really busy week coming up for us, but can we have that available to the governing body by the end of the week of the 15th and available for them to review so that it can be made available to the public before the next council meeting? Does that feel like a reasonable timeline for you?
Sure. I would just ask that you put in writing specifically number out what the questions from yourself or the governing body are so that I can make sure to respond to each of them appropriately.
Yeah, I think the request was to create a rubric, and maybe I'm wrong here. The request was to create a rubric with some of the various options, and then what the thought process was around that decision, rather than really a question.
I would prefer to have more detail if I'm being directed to put something together for the governing body instead of asking me for something with some of the description, is to bullet out exactly what the criteria, give me some more guidance that I can use to make sure that I'm answering the question appropriately.
Councilman Sanders, since you were
I'm happy. I think I'm happy to outline that.
Might I suggest that, Alex, that you put the all of your criteria down the left-hand side, all the types of software across the top, and then just put an X, and then we could see which ones met your criteria the most, and we could see where that was all, where you rationalized it out.
Yes, with the caveat that it's not going to be binary. It's not that each criteria either has a yes or a no answer.
That's fine.
Okay. So Council President Acero, if you'd like to work with Councilman Sanders on that to help drive some of that conversation.
We can do that, yeah.
Great. All right, so we have a motion on the table. Cindy, I'm sorry.
Yes, you do. You have a motion, but we don't have a second yet.
Can I get a second on approving Resolution 85? Councilman Taylor for the second. Can I get a roll call vote?
Councilman Sanders?
This is a tough vote, given the circumstances of where we are in this process. The follow-up we're going to do, I'm going to vote yes. I do think that the process and how we explain things to the public is going to have to improve and change.
Councilwoman Taylor?
Yes.
Councilwoman Urbish?
Yes, so long as we are providing all of this information in a timely manner. And I agree with Councilman Sanders. We need to get more effective in our communication.
Thank you. Council President Acero?
Yes, and I second Councilwoman Urbish's comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Fall?
Yes. Okay, moving on to resolution number 84, which is the resolution to authorize the insertion of a special item of revenue in the 2020 calendar year budget, chapter 159. Are there any other further questions from the council regarding this?
Mayor, we've already done that one. The special item. Yeah, let's see, that was, yes, that was the 84 and 85 was the contract with Spatial Data Logic.
Right, but now we're moving on to the resolution on the special revenue, which I don't believe we've taken action on.
We did, Mayor. That was number 84 was the insertion of a special item of revenue.
I don't think we've taken action on that yet.
Okay.
I thought putting aside the numbers, because there seems to be some number confusion, I thought our first vote was on canceling a prior resolution authorizing the contract with Suburban Engineering. We voted on that, I believe.
Correct.
That's
correct. And then
we just voted on the Spatial Data Logic.
And now we have one final action to take.
That's my understanding too.
Mine too.
Okay. So are there any questions or comments from the council regarding this resolution? Councilwoman Taylor?
Yeah, I'm sorry. So 83 was canceling the contract with Suburban. 85 was approving the SDL. 84 is going to be the special revenue item or approving the contract with Princeton Hydro.
it would be the chapter 159. We have to do that first.
So
you have to
there's two
approve
more
that
action
insertion.
items.
Yes. The insertion for the special item of revenue has to be done first, which is why I had to move things around. And then you have to approve the contract with Princeton Hydro. But Princeton Hydro could wait until the 23rd. The special item of revenue is what we need to do tonight. We've got to send that to the state and get that put in the budget so that you can do the contract with Princeton Hydro.
Okay. So are there any questions regarding this resolution? Cindy, I think the highlighted agenda that I'm using here, there's something.
Yes, I had trouble with it today. I did. I apologize. I had trouble. I lost things. And
this is not your fault. Would you mind just sending me the revised agenda so that I can engage with everybody else?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, are there any questions from the public regarding this resolution? Hearing none. Can I get a motion to pass this resolution? That's a first from Councilwoman Taylor, second from Councilwoman Urbish. All in favor? I'm sorry, can I get a roll call vote?
Councilman Sanders?
Yes.
Councilwoman Taylor?
Yes.
Councilwoman Urbish?
Yes.
Council President Asaro?
Yes.
Mayor Fall?
Yes. Council President Asaro, can I ask you to read the final resolution number and name into the record?
Yes, if I could get to that. I want to make sure I have the latest one, Mayor. Hold on one second.
Or, I'm sorry, Council, Cindy, would you mind reading the resolution?
Yes, I will read that. It is a resolution to authorize the contract with Princeton Hydro for engineering services for the grant filed for stream stabilizations for 37 South Main Street, Block 1045, Lot 21 and 22, in an amount not to exceed $25,191, funded through a grant from FEMA.
Okay. Do you have any questions regarding this resolution? Hearing none, are there any public comment? I see Sandra Harris has her hand raised. Tina, would you mind?
Yes. Sandra, please say your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
Sandra Harris, 28 Swan Street. I guess I'd like just a few seconds of background as to how this came about, because obviously there's much of Swan Creek that could use retaining walls. So does the city own the Hibernia Fire Department? Does it have to be a grant that came through the city? So I'd just like some context. Thank you.
So the answer to that is we do not own the Hibernia Fire Station. It is owned by a nonprofit and houses Fisherman's Mark. Fisherman's Mark had some concerns about the efficacy of that wall and came to the city in 2018, early 2019, with the possibility of applying for this grant. The city is partnering with Fisherman's Mark and Hibernia in order to implement this grant, and we're taking this opportunity to sort of, and we've had conversations about this with the public, that this grant is an opportunity for us to get sort of our foot in the door with some of the work that needs to be done along Swan Creek, and starting to take a more global look at our flooding issues in the city, and if there are other either other grants or other engineering work that we can do to start to address what is a chronic flooding issue along Swan Creek.
That's wonderful. And will there be opportunities, I guess, to participate in conversations about going after more of these opportunities?
Yes, the first thing that we wanted to do was to get our engineers up and running. We changed engineering firms this year. We had T&M that had been sort of stalled out on working on some of the flooding issues for almost a decade. We decided to bring in Suburban Engineering, who has some very specific municipal flood experience, to engage them in conjunction with Princeton Hydro on this project, to start to think through some options and opportunities that we may have. We had, as I said, we had an initial conversation with the community. We expect that to continue.
Okay, and last question. In this study, will they be looking at how whatever they recommend affects downstream from the fire department?
Yes, and that was a specific concern that was also raised at that community event. What we're doing here will have little to no, direct impact on flow, but it will shore up the wall along the Hibernia Fire Department. And it's good to note here that one of the solutions that they're looking at is sort of long-term growth to shore up that wall. As well as some other sort of more natural interventions to try and avoid any significant changes in flow.
Thank you.
Okay, hearing no other questions, can I get a motion? Mr. Sanders for the first, Council President Nacera for the second. Can I get a roll call?
Councilman Sanders?
Yes.
Councilwoman Taylor?
Yes.
Councilwoman Urbish?
Yes.
Council President Asaro?
Yes.
Mayor Fall?
Yes. Okay, moving on. Alex, we have here your update to the public.
We're just doing that on the second meeting of each month.
Great. I think we'll all thank you for that on the second meeting of the month then. Okay. We've got some announcements regarding the census, Councilman Sanders. And then I also know that you had requested a Penny's pipeline update. If you could do both of those now, that'd be appreciated. Councilman, I believe you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'll be very brief. Our Penny's committee has been meeting for years now, and very proud of its work. A number of very active, interested and smart residents have been working to keep this in the forefront and represent the town. A longtime leader was Philomena Hengst, and she led the group with grace and intelligence, and I couldn't say enough good things about her. I'm very proud of the work that she did. She did, because of other commitments, need to step down. Our committee is going to do a little something for her, but I did want to take the privilege here of noting her fine work and just to thank her for her contributions in this, because she really did a great job. The second on the census, I'll be very brief here. We're just kind of stuck a little bit over, I think 71% in terms of our response. I have been in contact with Indivisible New Jersey, Lambertville, and had some really good discussions that we're going to try to make sure that we're not stepping over each other with the city's efforts and other community members who are interested in this. I guess the next thing that we're trying to get the census has delayed until August 11th. They call their non-response follow-up. So census takers are going to start interviewing households in person, I believe. This was supposed to happen in May, but because of the delayed schedule because of COVID. So we're really trying to get out to the folks that are the harder to reach folks. Elderly community and English as second language are the key target areas. So that's the update I have for today.
Councilman Sanders, if there's anything that we can do to provide some service there, either making sure that there's a census update in the COVID public email that goes out on Thursdays, warning people that there may be census takers coming to their door, and to be aware of any of that. Alex and myself are happy to be of service to you there. I also know that there are a series of lawn signs that are sort of to help support people, reminding people that the census is coming.
I have a bunch of those and have been distributing those. So if folks are interested in displaying those, especially if you're on a corner or a high trafficked area, please let me know. I'm happy to get you a sign for that too.
Okay, great. With that, are there any other comments from the council? I do want to echo what Councilman Sanders has said about Philomena Hanks. We also, due to her varied interests, we also lost her to the planning board, and that was also a big loss for us there. So, I know everybody knows Philomena as a go-getter in our community, and I'm sure that won't slow her down. So if there aren't any other comments, then we'll open up for public comment from the public.
Okay, Bart, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
Yes, it's Bart Thurber, 53 Lambert Lane. I just wanted to actually offer my services regarding the library. I was chair of a library board for a town similar size for 6 years, trained as an architect and actually director of a similar nonprofit cultural institution dealing with all the COVID reopening issues. So I'd be happy, you've got my contact information. If I can be of any help, I'd be willing to do so.
I'm happy to pass your information along to Matt and the board. I know Karen is still on the call, and we'd be, obviously any help that these volunteer boards can get, we appreciate.
Lily, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
Yes, hi, Lily Chen, 17 Clinton Street. This is a question to Alex. The lead remediation that you were referring to, can you explain to me what method, because $200,000 sounds like a lot. What method were we thinking of doing? Was it, I know there are several methods and there are pros and cons, but what method were we estimating the $200,000 for? Was it to remove it, or was it something else?
Lily, I appreciate the question. This was actually something that came up before Alex was ever on the scene. This was actually a holdover from an action in 2018. We went to bid for the painting of the library. with caveat in that RFP, that request for proposals, specifically regarding lead remediation, and came back with a pretty wide swath of proposals, all of which were pretty expensive. And then as a part of the October facilities review, we had, I believe, and Alex, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, we had Michael Burns then go through and make some estimated costs, not based on that initial bid process, but instead what the general averages are for other municipalities that have similar work.
So Michael Burns made the recommendations for the method to remove the lead, or did you have a specialist come in? And did we bid this out to several remediation companies, or are we just basing it on Michael Burns?
We did bid it out to multiple remediation companies before Michael Burns made a cost estimate. The bids that came back were ultra high, and not something that the city felt that they could invest in at that time, which is what slowed down the process of us engaging in that painting work at the beginning of 2019. In October of 2019, we then engaged Michael Burns on a general cost estimate as a larger part of our facilities review.
So what was his recommendation? What's the $200,000? Was it to remove it, or was it to encapsulate the paint? What was the method?
I don't know that I can answer that off the top of my head, but I'm happy to
Because
follow up.
it's a night and day difference in pricing. That's why I'm wondering what was the $200,000. I mean, encapsulating is usually the least expensive route versus trying to remove, and they're recommending that removing is actually more dangerous. So I'm just, it's a library where it's surrounded by a lot of homes and children, and I would just want us to think about this very carefully before we take any contractor's recommendations.
Just to be clear, we're not taking any action on lead removal. We were just asking the library to come in and give us a list of what their significant concerns were around their facility today.
Okay, thank you.
Lauren, please put your full name and address into the record, and please proceed with your comment or question.
Lauren Kovacs, 90 Douglas Street. I asked that the city consider leaning on the qualified professional residents that we have in the city that I know have spoken up at meetings to say that they have expertise in building rehab and things like that, and prioritize the maintenance for the city's buildings for the residents, something that we feel pride in and want to maintain. And then to consider if the painting of the library is being done to encapsulate the lead, that the more ornate painting design that was designed by the city architect be scrapped for something that would be easier to facilitate, and so probably much cheaper, and just paint it white or something like that. I asked also that the council stop signing any additional contracts or bonding for any additional money until the new council members are sworn in. And then, was the money that was spent for the development and planning from the capital budget?
Okay, there were quite a few questions in there. Would you like?
No, they were all statements, actually. The beginning. I'm asking, the first question is that was the spending for the planning and development work that was done from the capital budget?
Some of that, we used capital ordinances for some of that work, and some of it was paid directly out of the operations budget, depending on how, where it was appropriate to use each of those funds.
So earlier in the meeting, Alex had mentioned wanting to keep capital costs very low this year, including costs for building maintenance, so that we didn't have to accrue additional debt. And so I just would like the city to reconsider that, from my point of view, that the existing building maintenance is a priority over planning fees to our services. Also earlier in the meeting, it was mentioned that there was a mold in the ventilation at the Acme building. And was that found to be tied at all to the building's proximity to water or from prior flooding?
Alex, do you have an answer on where the mold, and I assume it was from, the ongoing water damage on that site?
Yeah, this was mildew that was most likely caused by that there was water damage to the Justice Center that was never properly fixed. And so you can actually see it in the Justice Center because there's bumps and waves under the floor tiles. And so that's one of the really big problems when we looked at evaluating the maintenance cost of all the facilities. One of the bigger ticket items was the unknown but potentially very high cost of having to remediate what's been potentially several years of water damage sitting underneath the floors in the Justice Center that was never actually fixed.
Then I asked that the city definitely not pursue developing that site to a greater extent in the future.
Lauren, on public record and in Lambertville Matters in writing and in person that we don't see a potential future, and actually on video that we don't see any potential future wherein the Acme would be the site that would be developed for any potential building for a police department or any potential municipal consolidation.
Great, thank you. And then finally, how were the CAT members chosen? What was the matrix for choosing the different CAT members?
We had a little over 50 community members apply to that board. I looked at those applications with several members of the council, with our city planner, with Alex, who are sort of my key stakeholders. Then also tried to get a diversity of ages, experience, personal, the personal work that they do, professional expertise, interest in the various parts of what the CAT would be discussing and working on. And then after we found the chairs, went through that list with the chairs, the entire list, to see if there were any concerns or additions they'd like to add. And when we had one dropout, I gave my recommendations of alternates to the board to choose.
Was any consideration given to whether people were sort of pro or against development in the community?
I did, there wasn't a lot of indication on the matrix of where, how people felt about development overall, but obviously, from my work with many members of this community, I was aware of, some of their stances and tried to have a good mix of people who have been on the record at public hearings against any new development in the city. I think we did a good job of having a spread of people who are neutral, who want more information, who are supportive, and who are against.
Thank
to try
you.
to reflect our community.
Thank you. And finally, would there be a design charrette or other open interactive process being scheduled before recommendations are made to the council by the CAT?
Yes, and in fact, we bonded for extra money in order for us to be able to do some of that community-oriented outreach and forums like charrettes. We've had that conversation, I believe, began in April of this year, and we're working with the community advisory team to do a series of public outreach options and forums like charrettes. We made that commitment to do that at the beginning of this year, and we are sticking to it.
Great, thank you.
Judy, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
Hi, Judy DeTrano, 6 Coriel Street. My question is actually regarding the COVID virus situation. Now that both the governors, Murphy and Wolf, Pennsylvania and New Jersey, have mandated mask wearing when outside, and particularly when not able to have appropriate distancing, which now, of course, is being expanded upon by the CDC, I believe we have quite an issue in regards to our towpath and in regards to the bridge crossing. And particularly on the weekends, the fact that we do have begun to have an influx of people who are, of course, utilizing those pathways and are not being attentive to wearing their masks. And I'm wondering if the city and if the bridge guards, now that it's a mandate, is there anything that we are doing to have some control over this other than asking people politely either to move over or to put a mask on? Is there anything the police are doing or the guards are doing? And before you respond, I do want to publicly say that I'm disappointed. You all know, I'm assuming you know, that over a week ago, maybe a week and a half ago, I emailed each of you on the city council in regard to this question, and prior to the mandate by Governor Murphy. And I have not heard from a single one of you. And that was disappointing. And I know it's been a busy week because of the primary vote and with a lot of other things. But at this point, now that there is a mandate from both states and we are sister cities, I would like to hear if we have any recourse for the people that are not using their masks.
So Judy, I'm going to answer this first. I appreciate that your comment here, and I did receive your email and strode into action, and I'm sorry I did not follow up with you directly to follow up. That was my fault. I reached out prior to your, following your email, I reached out to our contact at the Attorney General's office to see whether or not the mask enforcement is actually enforceable as a ticketable offense. And I'm waiting to hear back from the governor's office on that issue. I will say that we have stationed a police officer at Bridge Street right at the canal crossing on busy weekends to monitor the use of the expanded sidewalks, to encourage residents to use that expanded sidewalk, and to provide a presence to remind people to wear their masks and stay 6 feet apart. Now that we're still waiting to hear whether or not this is actually enforceable, and then we can make a policy based on that on enforcement. I hadn't heard back, which is why I did not get back to you. But again, that was my fault. I could have let you know.
I appreciate that. Maddie, did you want to say something? I see your hand up.
I'm sorry, Judy. I'm gonna call on our members of council.
I appreciate that, certainly.
Councilman Taylor, you had your hand up first.
Oh, yeah, just want to say, Judy, I don't know what happened, but I did not receive your message in my council email, and it was not in the spam. So I don't know what happened, but just letting you know, I did not receive it.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Urbish.
Yes, I'm sorry, Judy. I saw your email and I actually had spoken to the mayor about it after, but I failed to respond. And that is one thing that I try really hard to make sure that I respond to folks in a timely manner. So I apologize for that. And I'm eager to see what we hear back from the Attorney General's office in terms of what enforcement, we really can do. I also want to note that the city partnered with New Hope Celebrates and other folks, and I believe New Hope Borough was part of this as well, on a mask initiative. I believe the masks are rolling out as we speak, that all of the businesses that sign up can get up to 30 free masks for their businesses and their employees. And then also looking at opportunities to perhaps sell masks in town as we're getting these influx of visitors, if anybody's showing up without a mask, having those as options for folks. But I'm glad that you raised this, because as the research is showing us, as we're learning more and more about this virus, even outside, wearing a mask is really important. So I was encouraged to see the governor's action, and I hope that we're able to do more in the city to really get folks to wear masks while outside and in close proximity to one another.
So appreciated, Maddie. Thank you.
Can we get the next question here?
Mayor, just if you wouldn't mind, just one quick question. Sorry, just one quick comment to Judy. Judy, it's Beth Asaro, so I answer your emails, often and quickly. So this was something that was evolving, and I didn't want to give you a I don't know answer. So I was waiting as the mayor was, so I apologize.
Yes, Beth, and that's correct. You always do answer my emails. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'd like to move on here. We've got another caller.
Yes, call-in user 1, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your question.
You're not on mute, caller. You can, if you state your full name and address, we can get started. Okay. If you want to try and call back in or raise your hand again, we will answer your question.
Matthew, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your question.
Matthew Hansen, 105 Douglas Street. I actually just wanted to follow up. It's a great point. I just want to thank Councilwoman Urbish for speaking about the mask initiative. So I'm speaking a little bit about New Hope Celebrates as the president. We've had over 150 businesses between the two towns register for the masks. We've given out the 3,000 that we committed to, but we actually have another 1,000 that we still have. So if there are more businesses or residents that need them, please go to celebrateourtowns.com to get them. I think maybe Councilwoman Urbish and I can connect, and maybe we can figure out a way to get some at that Bridge Street location where the officer is. And instead of a violation, we could say, hey, these are basically at cost. They're $2. They're really not, expensive, and figure out a way to help increase those masks going out in the public as much as possible to help our citizens.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks.
Sue, please state your full, yes?
I'm sorry. We've got caller user 1 has raised their hand again.
Sure.
Can we pull them to the front?
Yes. User number 1, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
Yeah, good evening. Hi, this is Audrey Burns on 33 Ferry Street. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I have a question regarding the library and the repairs that were mentioned. Going back to the community development fair, I do remember having a conversation with Matt. He was talking about applying for a grant that was, I think, due in like March. So I'm kind of wondering, did we get the grant in on time, and what is the status of that application, and would any of that money, if we are awarded it, would that go towards these repairs? And I guess the second question to that is, do any of our own city workers, are they able to do any maintenance repairs on the building, like such as building a railing? Like, can we utilize some of our current staff for any of this work?
Yeah, I appreciate your question. So the first part is that grant was something that we were hoping to pursue for the library repairs this year. There was 2 rounds of that grant after a long and sort of difficult conversation with the library board and the city. Unfortunately, there just wasn't enough time for us to complete that grant in a competitive way, and so we made the decision to try and apply for that grant in round 2 instead. Alex, I don't know whether or not we also had applied for the technology portion of that grant. We did not. Okay, so we're on track at this point to to put our application for round 2 of that grant, particularly with some of the really significant, public pushback, around some of the development questions with the library. Neither the library nor myself felt like we were capable of moving forward that early on in the conversation with a grant application. But we expect to be able to do that for round 2 next year.
So the deadline for the round 2 would be June of 2021?
I don't know what the deadline is, but it is in 2021.
Oh, okay.
I don't know also with COVID-19 where that, a lot of the grant information and stuff has gotten shuffled around and what that's going to look like. But I know that Matt and several members of our library board are tracking towards that still. And then in terms of our public works department, our public works department does do, minor repairs and maintenance of the buildings. For instance, when there was a window broken in on City Hall, our public works department managed the repair of that. But for things that are structural and require licensing, we try and get we want to make sure that those things are done correctly. Alex, do you feel like that's a fair? So when we can use our public works department, we do. When we need to do something that's more structural, we go to the experts.
Right, yeah, I understand. But in regards to also using our own businesses in town, on Bridge Street, we have a really great restoration company, Green. They're on Bridge Street, and they're the family that's been working on renovating the farmhouse down by the cemetery. And they've been doing a fabulous job with rehabilitating that farmhouse that's way older than the library. So
well,
I think
I
it'd
agree.
be worth just getting a quote or feedback from them as well.
Well, I agree with you that anytime that we can use local businesses, that the city should, but with public contracting laws, there's a procurement process. We can't favor local businesses, unfortunately. But I wish that we could. That is yet another reason why New Jersey contracting and procurement is out of control.
Well, even if it went through a bidding process?
No, that would be, if they applied through a public bid, we would be able to accept them.
So is that a potential way, or is that a way we have to go through a public bid? Yeah, okay.
Alex, you said you want to answer this?
Yeah, depending on the cost, we have a qualified purchasing agent, so we would have to bid any project over $40,000 unless we're purchasing it on a state contract, for example. That was just raised slightly. Unfortunately, under bidding, we have no qualitative subjective discretion whatsoever. We have to choose the lowest responsible bidder, and that's like a pretty narrowly defined. For smaller projects, we have slightly more discretion, but as the mayor said, actually, this is something I had worked on with previously, wanted to adopt sort of like a local purchasing policy, and that would be in a pretty gray area, legally speaking. So for the smaller stuff, we have a little bit of discretion if we don't have to get bids. And in those cases, we do try to favor local businesses and go to places like Finkel's instead of Home Depot and stuff like that. And so that is something that we'll take into account when doing these things, unless it goes above a certain level. And then we, unfortunately, as the mayor said, our hands are kind of tied and we don't get to make that preference.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sue, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question.
Sue Bell, 407 Sergeant Drive. I just have a comment. I was in Doylestown yesterday and today, and on Main Street, they have closed one side of the sidewalk so that they can have outside dining, So they have signs that you have to go to the other side. And I just thought it might be worth Lambertville looking at it and considering it, because we know outside dining is so restrictive in the community. And since the governor hasn't opened up indoor dining for health reasons, that maybe it would be a way we could come up with another solution for the restaurants. So I thought it was pretty creative. If anybody's driving through Doylestown, it's right on Main Street, like from Starbucks up to the courthouse.
Thank you, Sue. We actually have a weekly call that we're doing with our business community, and I'll ensure that we bring that up at our weekly call to the business.
Thanks.
Elizabeth, please state your full name and address into the record, then please proceed with your comment or question. Oh, her hand went down. Oh, wait, we're back up. Okay, 1 second. Okay, Elizabeth, please state your full name and address into the record, and please proceed with your comment.
Got it. Sorry.
It's okay.
It's my first time doing this, and I couldn't unmute myself, as techie as I am. So, hi, Liz Battaglia, 132 South Main Street. And I'm sorry, this is a little off topic from what you're talking about right this second, but the community action team, CAT, I was wondering how those members were selected. I know that I think there were around 50 applicants. I was not one, but I was just curious, out of the 50, how did you choose who you chose to represent this advisory board?
So I appreciate the question. This was previously asked in the public comment tonight.
I've been here, I didn't hear it, I'm sorry.
No problem. So just very briefly, there was an application process. About 50 people applied. We knew that we wanted a 20-person board. We went through and read all of those applications with the business administrator, Alex, myself, and Emily. We talked about it with members of the council. We then chose the chairs, and then went through all of those applications with the chairs as well. I made my recommendations. The city planner made her recommendations. We landed on 20, and then when that final list was produced, we also had alternates. We lost at least one person, due to timing constraints. And so our alternates were then chosen by the CAT chairs.
So thank you for that. And I get that. I'm sorry I missed that before. The two people who are also co-chairs, two members of the planning board, including a co-chair of the planning board, being co-chairs of the CAT, like I don't know, I thought you were like looking for completely new eyes on this other board, like you didn't want anything involved with anything else, and you have these two people who are also functioning as another function. I'm curious as to why, I'm purely curious. This is not coming from any set reason.
So Paul Kuhl, who's the chair of the planning board, has sat on the planning board for over 20 years and provides an incredible amount of experience on land use in the city, as well as a historic perspective on land use for the city. We want, as a member of the planning board, you also have to go through training on different land use rules across the state. I felt that was an asset to have two people who were not just sort of the layman, but who had really grappled with public issues around development and made, as a part of a public board, and who were volunteers who have done that for, a significant number of years. Also, Paul Kuhl is also an accountant, and Sarah Gold holds a PhD and does quite a bit of work around inequality issues. And so I felt that was a good dynamic between those two board members. There's also a pretty significant age difference.
I think that sounds amazing. I think that all sounds amazing. I just, you already have them in the town service. We all have them ipso facto in our disposal. I thought that this side group was meant to be sort of, outside the realm, like with people don't have that kind of background necessarily, who, I didn't run for it. This is not about me. Everyone calm down. This is just me wondering, about the backgrounds and how people were chosen. That's all. I just want to make sure it's not a for show group.
I certainly do not think that this is for show. One of the things that I was trying to do was actually not just sort of pick randomly from the community, but pick people who also were stakeholders within the community that had big pockets of folks that they could communicate to. Sarah Gold is also on the executive committee for Indivisible Lambertville New Hope, and that provides us with access into that community group, which I think is a significant one. Paul Kuhl, beyond his volunteer service at the planning board, has lived in town for a significant number of years and has his own sort of stakeholder groups. So
Those
it was
guys are great. Those guys are great. I'm not arguing the greatness of the people that you did choose for it. I just, I mean, what about the person who doesn't have those credentials? Like, I just wanted to make sure they were spoken for. I don't have those
absolutely,
credentials, nor did I run or anything. But like, I mean, I'm just saying, like, I just want to be able to say to somebody who asked me, because people have asked me, people think that I know things that I don't necessarily know, and they ask me, Liz, who's on this board? Do they represent all of us? And I want to be able to say with confidence, yes, they do. They represent all of us here. And that's what I'm asking for.
Liz,
I'm asking for
if you allow me to finish here really quickly, while those two chairs, I chose those two chairs for their work on those boards. We have folks on this board who have never volunteered for the city of Lambertville before, and people who have been volunteering for the city for over 40 years. We've got folks from a wide variety of personal backgrounds, of ethnic, age, and racial backgrounds. We did try and produce an actual sort of diverse group of thought.
That's great. I'm happy to hear it. And again, I mean, I think most people, most people on this call don't know me, but Julie, you know me, and I happily would have volunteered had I known. But I did want to make sure that it was a representative group, and also that it wasn't swayed by people already sitting on another council, because that would seem unfair. But if you're telling me that everybody has a fair vote in that committee, then that's great.
Councilman Urbish?
I just wanted to point out that the list of the members and sort of their, qualifications and the reasons why they applied are listed on the city's website at lambertvillenj.org/CAT, C-A-T. So you can also take a look there.
Yes, and I have, and they're wonderful. Again, it's just, it's a small town yet a big town, and, I don't know why people landed on it or not landed on it. Again, I don't really speak that so much, but I wanted to just put it out there that, I hope that it's because you said that you wanted it to be a really nice and, varied council for you. And I hope it is, and I hope it's helpful, and I hope it gives you varied voices and lots of different takes on things that help develop the town into something better. And
I couldn't agree with you more, and I do think that the board that we've appointed, it does accomplish that, and I'm looking forward to hearing their recommendations.
All right, thanks for hearing me out. Have a good one.
Seeing no other comments, are there any comments from the council? Hearing none, if we can get a motion to close.
So moved.
Councilman Sanders for first, Councilman Urbish for second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, meeting's adjourned. Thank you so much for coming.